on the podium.
Kia ora, Tanika.
Kia ora. Do you want to pause the recording until we start?
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Just from a timing.
Oops, here he is, with a cup of tea. And dressed for the occasion.
G'day, Tonchi. You're on mute. You're on mute, Tonchi.
I finished that too.
Yes.
Firstly, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Waikanae Community Board meeting on the Tuesday, the 15th of March. I'd like to say a special thanks to Martin for participating in the conversation also, and declare the meeting open. What we'll do is, do I have any apologies? No, I haven't received apologies from the Mayor for the meeting either, so if that could be noted. Do I have any declarations of interest relating to agenda items? No. If we can move forward to public speaking time, I've got a sort of a proxy order of discussion, and if I ask Anna Carter to come forward and talk through Zoom to the community board, that would be great. So Tracy, if you're able to invite Anna into the community board meeting, and we can go from there.
Mr. Chair, do you want me to put the timer on? And if so, for how long?
I think we talked that the detail that they've got is going to be a little bit longer than the typical 3 minutes that we normally have. I'd suggest at least 6 minutes for this part of the discussion there.
Okay.
But just for all participants in public speaking time, this is a meeting held in public, not a public meeting. So if there are members of the public who want to talk during other public speaking time, I would prefer that those discussions are taken at a different time and not used to interject the conversation of members of the public talking. So if we can just all respect that common courtesy, that would be great. So welcome, Anna.
Tēnā koutou, James and board members and members of the public. Thank you, and officers as well. Thank you for hosting us tonight. With me is Sarah Poff, who's landscape architect, who's worked on this Waikanae Domain landscape plan, and Chris is a member of the Waikanae Community Board, and so what we wanted...
Waikanae Residents Association.
Sorry, Waikanae Residents Association. So what we wanted to share with you today was it's a culmination of actually not just 1 year's piece of work, but quite a few years' pieces of work. Although back in March last year, you kindly granted us $7,200 to engage Sarah to prepare a landscape strategy. And we have gone away and done that piece of work. This piece of work has really, what it's done is try to bring the community together and formulate a plan moving forward for our domain that we can articulate in a way that then the Kapiti Coast District Council and their team and their management, their Parks and Reserves team can take it out to the broader public. We have been in a place back in 2017 when the Waikanae Residents Association was formed, where we recognised that there are competing users for our domain, and we wanted to articulate a community vision, and we didn't think council, well, we knew that council wasn't in a place to articulate that in a time frame that we were looking, we thought was going to be timely. And so when we approached the Waikanae Community Board last year, this was our objective, was look, we wanted to support a process that the council could jump on board with, that we could just initiate. So this is where we've engaged Sarah and worked closely, and Sarah's worked closely with the Waikanae Residents Association and our wider community, and Te Atiawa Ki Whakarongotai and other mana whenua to develop this vision. And what we've done is we've worked with Mike Mendoza's team to draft it up in a template that can be taken by council and then used in a council reserve management plan process. So the proposal is that the Waikanae Community Board looking to review this document, accept this document, and recommend that it be adopted by the Kapiti Coast District Council for further consultation that can, and obviously ultimately public notification. So we've put together a resolution. I think before we go to that resolution, I'd just invite Chris, if he could, to speak to the consultation that we've done, and then Sarah can actually speak to the plan itself. And I can share my screen and we can actually look at which I will start doing. Or do you want to speak?
I'll speak first, and then perhaps Sarah can share the screen and look at the
So
plan.
we'll bring the plan up. So Chris, if you could just talk to the consultation that we've done.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you everyone for allowing us the opportunity to address you tonight. So we basically received the application. We got the funding granted. So the first thing we went out and did was we held some workshops with the public in the Rakarangi. We gave the opportunity for drop-in sessions at the Rakarangi Hall. We also started to kick off early sort of Māori engagement, mana whenua engagement. We started with looking at members of our residents association who are mana whenua or who are Māori. We then actually started to look at what the different mana whenua groupings were. Then we started to approach them. We also, at the same time, did quite a lot of research on the history through the Rakarangi area and through the Waikanae catchment. We determined to go and see the Ki Utiki Tai committee, and we also wanted to basically touch base with, keep going back to the wider community. So we brought it back to more residents association meetings. We were lucky enough to, through contact with Te Atiawa ki Whakarangatai, we got to engage in 2 or 3 meetings with Ra Higgett. And Ra always said when he was engaging with us that we couldn't take the work that we were doing with him and call it the appropriate iwi engagement. So we understand that was just him giving us a hand. And then obviously, once we had sort of done a couple of drafts, we then wanted to go and talk to council officers and talk to them about where we had come from. So we talked to council officers, Mike Mendoza and Gareth Eloff, and they recommended that we go away and we write up a management plan. Instead of it just being sort of a landscape plan, that sort of needed the management plan, and they gave us the McLean Park management plan as a template. So we took that template and we basically adopted it for the Rakarangi domain in terms of a management plan. That was obviously a slightly larger step than we had envisaged, and we ended up with like a 53-page document which went with the design. So we put that back out about 8 or 9 days ago on the Facebook page, and we've had a few comments, but I think that the management plan aspect of it is actually quite daunting for people. We've also, I took the plan back to Ra, and he said we would like to go back to the Taio coordinator at Aotearoa ki Whakarangatai. We fully respect that, and we'd like to support them through the process, and we were very pleased to have Ra involved in the time. I understand that they have contacted council officers and sought some formal engagement over it, but that all sort of really depends on what the community board thinks of it once they've had a chance to have a look at it. So obviously our resolution is that it goes out for public engagement, and the appropriate mana whenua engagement can occur with some council assistance. So that's where I'd like to leave it, but potentially I'd like to hand over to Sarah, who could potentially walk you through some of the design and some of the concepts and discuss some of the reasons for the concepts.
So we'll just share the screen and bring up the management plan. I'm going to go down to the landscape. This is the document that has been put together, and it's a beautiful piece of work. But the pictures always speak 1,000 words, and I've got to find the right one. Just, Sarah, did you want to jump in at that point?
Yeah, or we could go to the wider landscape.
That one, please.
Oh, the one in mind, that one, yeah, 46, yeah.
Okay.
So just a little quick overview of Rikarangi Domain and where it sits, obviously in the landscape in Rikarangi. So we were quite interested in its wider connections as well as obviously what's happening in the domain, and there's obviously continuing discussions around walkways and cycleways and bits and pieces. So it was how we linked into that as well and where we fit. And from a heritage perspective, cultural heritage perspective, we've got St Andrew's Church and Hall, and then the Rikarangi Hall, which is the old school building, which has heritage status as well. So how that little hub, and obviously in history, how that area operated. So in the reserve management plan, that's covered off a wee bit about what happened in that space and what happens in that space now, I suppose. So just where the Awa is and how close in proximity we are to the river, even though the domain doesn't front the river as such, it's right there. So it's, there's a sense of being on that river terrace and its connection to the Awa. There's been a large focus in the valley, as you're well aware, with the funding on and how fencing off of waterways, revegetation, all those sorts of things, and how the domain fits into that probably has been quite a focus. And Ra gave us a really great steer and said, for us, it was very important how we activate this reserve rather than it being sort of like a very quiet place most of the time. It's quite busy in the evenings. There's a lot of activity that happens in the evenings with different groups and clubs, but during the day it's quite empty, and just how we can activate it and get people into that place. So we'll pop down to the plan, Anna. So we obviously, that next one, that's great. Yeah, wonderful. So we've just
get rid of the table of contents on the side so that we can make it slightly bigger.
If you zoom in, Control Plus. That one. If you go to Control Plus, just on there, that'd be great. Control Plus. Yeah. So that's great. Thanks, Anna. So next one up. Let's go. I'll take over. Can I get to go up? Here we go. So this is very much a draft concept plan for the landscape. So obviously looking at the church here in St Andrew's Hall, the Rikarangi Hall here, the tennis court and the car park, quite obviously at the moment the dominant features in that landscape. So there was quite a strong focus and desire from the community about how they've been using the space and how they want the space to move forward. So I've picked up the previous work that has been done and the vision and how they want to enhance, protect and understand obviously the cultural heritage of the place and how we can engage with the wider community. So it's been an exercise in what can we fit in, what can we leave as flexible space, how do we engage with the wider community, and getting a few things happening on the site that helps to activate it every day. So obviously at A1 we've got the existing car park, which we'd quite like to look to enhance that and formalise that a little bit more, and then from that point have a slightly more formal entry and connection from that car park through up into the domain itself. And then look to open up, I suppose, the front along Akatarawa Road, open up that frontage so that there's ample parking and ease of access that you can kind of move into the domain.
The vehicle.
Not in a vehicle. So keep the circulation separate and then have like a shared footpath cycleway along the front edge of the domain that links you to whichever part you'd like to enter the domain with and through. So B3, we looked at obviously a heritage orchard. Back in the day, the Fruit Growers Association was very keen on the area as a fruit growing region. And so we've sort of, I don't know if we've got heritage species in the valley yet, but there's an opportunity to bring that element in. B2, maintain the existing tennis court facility. B1 is the existing hall, so look to enhance and restore that and bring back some of the heritage around that area and how we can link to an outdoor area playground and have eyes on that playground, and then further to the west, eyes on the bluff and the reserve and be part of that wider basin landscape. There's an image I'd love to show you quickly, so I will zoom to that after this. And then obviously maintain the main entry point, which would be sort of like a lock and key system where for events, maintenance, that sort of thing. Look to introduce obviously a public toilet that is accessible. If we're going to bring people into this place, we need to think about that obviously and have it in a visible, safe location following set principles and bits and pieces like that. We've got an existing arena on the site, which is a horse arena, equestrian facility, which is probably quite unique in a neighbourhood park. And how the future of that works out for the community is an interesting one. So that's there at the moment. And then looking at B4 here at an opportunity to engage with Jobs for Nature and the plant growing nursery for the wider restoration projects focused around the Waikanae Awa, which would hopefully and potentially also bring people every day or every other day to the reserve. So there was this idea that it would activate it a little bit. And then obviously revegetate the edges, start to give us a little bit more of a sense of enclosure around that outside edge. And then on Akatarawa Road, look to do, it's the one part of the valley which is really interesting. There's very little vegetation. So along this area, look to introduce some specimen trees, street tree, the idea of a street tree planting, which in effect has a traffic calming, does a traffic calming exercise for us. So looking at how we can implement other structures or features and trees to slow the traffic through there because it does move quickly. And then I'll just quickly zip down to the idea of a, so what could it be for the local community and the wider community from a nature play trail idea? So looking at using, not requiring the need for attenuated surfaces, so keeping all play equipment 600, below 600 from ground and falling height. Where we do introduce anything, it would be a bark in the low maintenance type of fall zone. So looking at nature-based play, be it logs, be it climbing, be it sliding, all those sorts of things. I worked on a project, Mount Victoria, Matarangi Nature Trail, a really good one to have a look at, where we just implemented lots of natural elements, and it's one of the main destination parks in Wellington now. It was all done off a very basic concept, so quite an interesting little project. And then I'd just quickly like to just zoom back to an image. Is it the other way in?
No, you're right.
Whoops.
Yep, yeah,
The one with where Waikanae sits in the Awa, in the valley, in the basin.
You're talking about the link.
It's a link.
Keep going. Keep going.
Keep going up.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not far.
So just while Sarah's scrolling, I'd just like
Yeah.
to say that Waikanae Domain was the school for the valley since 1896. So all of the valley's residents basically were schooled at that location and arrived on horseback in the early days. So, you know, it's got a really strong social connection with the early settlers of the valley. There's also a really rich history around organisations using the domain, and it is actually a very, very focal point for any of our, it would be a very, very important point for any civil defence emergency that we might have. So we're pretty keen on sort of seeing it be the best thing it can be, recognising obviously budgetary constraints and everything else. But the way that we thought about it is that if we have a plan, then we can actually just keep actively working on that plan over time, and we have a shared vision for it. The Jobs for Nature in Kutiki Tai have already donated 700 trees this year, and we've got residents that have been keeping those trees through to the winter for planting. Obviously, given the fact that we haven't finished consultation with the community in Mana Whenua, we'll be looking to plant the less sort of controversial parts or less contentious parts of the plan. But we'll be really keen to get some actual direct action on the ground on improvement of the domain going. So we'll be really keen on any feedback, and we'll be really keen on the community board supporting the resolution that we've put forward.
And if I could just also, sorry, Sarah.
No, you're fine.
I know you want to talk to us. In fact, you talk to it and then I can wrap up. That's fine.
So this was just, you know, such an interesting, for me, such an interesting graphic, and only being in the valley for 3 years, and the more time I spend in the Kapiti coast and up in Rikarangi, just how special this area is. And obviously it's been recognised as special, and I think where obviously the domain sits in this landscape and what's happening in that landscape is just, and how close we are to the coast, is just so special. And I think, yeah, it's an exciting little project, and you know, there'll be a list of, you know, things that need to be done for maintenance, but then there will be a list of things that, you know, that, as Anna said, the Residents Association and Chris said, that we can work towards and, you know, apply for funding and sort of transform that space. Yeah.
I'll stop sharing unless you want me to keep it up. But you've already got copies of it in front of you as well, but just want to thank you for your time for looking through it with us. I think what we're proposing is quite unique. I don't know if this has been done by any other community in Kapiti before, where, you know, with the support of the residents of the community board. So, and I think we're really, all the people who've been involved in it are really excited for it, because it shows an opportunity for real genuine partnership with the community, iwi and council. So that's really what we want to leave with you, is this vision that we kind of want to continue to give effect to, just through sheer passion and love for a place. And yeah, so the next step is really that we are looking for council, for community board for a resolution from the community board to recommend that the council adopt this as a draft, or a working draft reserve management plan, and that they then take it to the next step, which is through that community process the Reserves Act requires.
That's us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, Anna, Chris, and Sarah. That's it's an exemplary bit of work that's been driven by the Rikarangi Residents Association, in terms of, it's probably the first I've seen anywhere across the Kapiti Coast District Council where the community has driven a management plan to this degree and formulated a proposal that could be put forward to KCDC. It's really ambitious bit of work too. You know, from my perspective personally, I can't speak for the whole board at this point in time, but I think it's something that the board would seek to endorse and support. I guess the key thing is making sure how this fits in terms of the long-term plan and the annual plans coming forward, and the competing budgetary constraints that we're working within. You know, that aside, though, this certainly gives a framework and an opportunity to work with council to ensure that these are put in. We can work with them to see how we can implement these, and coming up with a sensible time frame by which we can invest in some of those solutions.
I just note a couple of hands up there, Tracy. Jocelyn's got her hand up and Michelle's got her hand up.
Yep, Mr. Chair, do you want to take those questions?
Indeed. So I'll hand it over to questions from the board. Jocelyn.
Thank you, Anna et al. For coming along to present this to us tonight, and to Sarah in particular for the work that she has done actually designing this in consultation with the community. So and as James said, it's great that an activity like this has been driven by the community, and that you're asking for our endorsement. So my question is has the KCD landscape architect seen this, particularly if the board is going to endorse this and potentially long-term plan funding may be sought for it?
Mr. Chair, it's Mike speaking. Maybe I could address that question with your.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. Myself and the new manager for Parks, Gareth Elliff, have spent some time with the team talking about the team's aspirations. I think there are some, as Chris said, there are some things that can simply happen, like the reduction of noxious plants and weeds and stuff that we can just do. There are some other stuff that will need a bit more thought, potentially resourcing, and as the chair said, we'll need to go through the long-term plan, and that relates to the buildings and potentially to planting. But there's some other stuff too, with respect to the connections to Waikanae ki Utiki Tai and to the cycleway, walkway and bridleway network that we can, that just makes sense and that we can get on with. So sorry, that's a rather long-winded answer to your question, but I guess in brief, we have been briefed on this by the community, and like yourselves, we are generally speaking positively disposed to the overall direction that the community has presented to you tonight. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that endorsement. I suppose my question is, has Jamie actually viewed this document?
Jamie Roberts? Yeah. He's not actually with the council anymore, but
I thought is he a contractor? Is he contracting?
He is, yeah. He has been with us since about October.
Yeah, I know that. I knew he was contracting though.
Yes, so he is contracting. Yeah.
So he hasn't viewed this.
No, he is not. No.
Okay, thank you.
Michelle, you've got your hand up there for questions.
Yep, just thank you to Waikanae Residents Association. I had a read through, and obviously others have already said this about it being a community-led initiative, and I suppose it would be nice to capture that in the documentation going forward. It reads currently as a council document, but given it's been developed in a very different way, I think that needs to be front and centre of this of the future document. And just with that thought in mind, that you've led it in a different way, have you thought about implementation of the plan? Are you anticipating it will be done through the normal annual plan process, or are you thinking that there are alternative ways for the community to engage in making this come to life?
Would you like me to speak to that, James?
Indeed, thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, it's interesting the way that you know, there are two parts to it. We obviously are really keen to make sure that it is that the synergies are reflective in the document, and we have referenced the kaupapa that we are looking for in section 8.3, which is the principal section, and we talk about having a shared vision and a shared, basically a memorandum of understanding, if you like, with council, that once adopted, that the community or the Residents Association, in conjunction with iwi, mana whenua, could apply for external funding and could carry out those works. It would obviously be, we would need to have an operational management plan in place and an agreement around that, but that's certainly captured in that kaupapa in the document. And I can't really speak to, I mean, we probably could elaborate more on, we could bring through the passion of the community more in the document, but we're really relying on the advice of council officers in terms of the template that we've presented. So we think that the best way of going forward at this stage is to make sure that we capture all the things that are necessary under the reserves management plan, but we're not fixed in the way it's presented.
Yeah, I just want to add to that and say, in particular, it's really important for us to actually get the mana whenua engagement right. We've only just started that process, but I think that as a residents association, it's very difficult for us to bring the firepower to bear that sort of engagement requires. We can start that process and we're very keen to see it done really well. The other thing about it is that when you look at a domain management plan, there's so many bits of it that are just basically driven by the statutory requirements. So we really appreciate the council giving us that framework to work with. I think that if you start to read some of the history in a bit more detail, you start to actually get the real, the grist of it. You know, there's a real story in there about the development of the domain over time. Some of the aerial images in the back sort of show a range of different buildings and things that were present on the site. We went through the museum and there's a bunch of links that we've stuck in there to photos that were pulled out of the museum. Most of them show kids assembled at different events, often with animals. I kind of think that we can bring it to life with images as much as we can with making it more personalised to the Residents Association. And as I, you know, like there is so much of that statutory stuff that we need to have in there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Richard, you've got a question there.
Yeah, first of all, I'd just like to congratulate you on what is a fantastic document. My comment or question was along the lines of Michelle's. I always think it's easier to sell something if you can tell them how much you're doing of it yourself. And if it was easier and more plain to see that the community will take this little part of the job and do it, fundraise for it, if under the guidance of KCDC, you probably will sneak it under the elected members' radar a lot more easily than if they have to worry about who's paying for it. So maybe a small tweak, another appendix saying this is what the community think they can do, and this is what we'd hope KCDC can put in over the next 5 to 10 years, and it might help it.
We do understand that there is budget for some amendments to the hall, which we think has got to be the priority for KCDC because of the current state of disrepair, and the management plan does actually address that in parts of it. And what we have done is we've left space under the project plans to actually articulate particular projects that we can go forward. We've left that blank at the moment because we wanted to put the plan through the public engagement process. We don't think the community, even in Rakarangi, has had enough time to look at it and understand it properly yet. So we really support and endorse that public process of consultation so that we can get that feedback, and we hope that out of that will come a list of projects that we can actually really dot the I's and cross the T's on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do any other board members have any questions? No. No,
Actually,
Anna,
I do. Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Jocelyn.
Thank you. It's sort of been touched on, but not really discussed. Have you done any budgets for the cost of this work, or broken it down into components, and maybe by priority? You know, just an overall, you know, just a high level. A few comments would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Jocelyn. At this stage, no, we haven't. I suppose we're just getting it the tick in the form of concept design, and then if everybody's on board with the direction it's heading, then I think absolutely there'll be a staging, and that staging, you know, will just be A, B, C, D, E, and there'll be a costing plan associated with that. And you might pick D because your funding fits that. It won't be so much a priority basis. My understanding is there's a lot of people in the local community that want to donate heritage fruit trees and things like that. There's a very active group that want to be part and parcel of it going forward. And
we have had very positive feedback from Jobs for Nature and Kia Tai. So we think that parts of the vegetation could be done reasonably quickly. In line with the building, we recognise council's constraints around funding, but we think that if we have an overarching plan, which sort of we can just continue to work on, then we've got something which it's got a form to it that we understand, and we can adopt. We're not expecting the whole thing to be done at once, but we think if we have a cohesive plan, then it will be a better result in the long run.
I think the other thing that's really interesting is that we are in a rural environment, so we are slightly more relaxed as to the level of maintenance and ongoing, you know, what we're looking at is low maintenance. Martin, oh no, you're adjusting your screen.
So thank you for that. And just one further question. So from what I can just see very quickly is that there's lots of elements in this plan, and they're not necessarily all dependent on the other ones occurring, and so it can be staged quite nicely.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think getting a bit of a vegetation framework is probably key, because that's, you know, requires the longer establishment time. So if we can get that happening, that would be exciting. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jocelyn.
Well, thank you very much, Anna, Chris and Sarah. That's a really great bit of work. What I propose is that we'll formulate a response under members' business, public speaking time responses, and see how if the board can come up with a method of supporting your proposal. I guess the key challenge for us as a board is, whilst you haven't got full engagement of the community, how we support that in a way that ensures that the document that we are able to provide our support, or ask that council take this management plan for the next stage in terms of going through greater community and public engagement, and then we can give it some legitimate wheels. So I guess that's a conversation we'll have in responses to public speaking time, and I'll be sort of advised a little bit by Mike with regards to proper process in that. I'm just not quite sure how we take that as a board. But I just really wanted to say thank you very much. It's a sensational bit of work driven from the community. I think Rikarangi's delivered some really great work over the years. So thank you.
I mean, ultimately, James and all of the community board members, this wouldn't have happened without your support. So, you know, I think you guys saw the vision for it, and we have really deeply want to acknowledge the Waikanae Community Board support in getting this far. And recognise that, you know, we aren't just we're part of the Waikanae community, and we really feel that you support that and see us as part of the community as well.
I just noted that Martin had a question about the plan on the web Waikarangi Facebook page versus the plan that's in the back of this document. We had slightly more recent versions of the landscape plan on the web page, then got pasted into the back of this management plan.
No, this is the right one. That's the other way around.
This is the other way around?
Yeah, it's the other way around.
Oh, it's gone the other way around.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
So we'll make sure that what's on the
Just check
Facebook
that.
page is the same as what you guys are saying.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much there. We'll move to the next public speaker then, if that's the case. And if I ask Steve to come forward there. So once again, thank you very much to the Rikarangi Residents Association for that great bit of work. Steve, if I can open the floor to you now.
Am I on the air?
You are indeed.
Very good. My name's Steve Hollett. I'm a member of the Waimanu Lagoons Reserve Focus Group. I wish to speak about item 6.2 on your agenda tonight, being a council paper titled Waimanu Lagoons Focus Group Confirmation of Terms of Reference. There's something very odd about this paper. Section 1 says the purpose of the paper is to confirm the terms of reference for the Waimanu Lagoons Focus Group, specifically the group's membership, and to seek this board's endorsement of those terms of reference. This is precisely what was resolved by this board at the 18th of June 2019 meeting. And in addition to resolutions accepting the revised terms of reference and appointing the 7 community members identified, the board further resolved that council note the earlier resolutions. The Waimanu Lagoons Focus Group was, from that point, back in operation. The purpose, therefore, of council's paper, I thought, should be nothing more than to advise the community board that their Waimanu Lagoons Focus Group resolutions from the 18th of June 2019 meeting have been noted by council. While I was researching the state of affairs, it's been difficult for a number of reasons, and I've got a couple here. Drilling into the minutes of the 18th of June 2019 meeting, there seems to be no copy of the submission from then board member Jeremy Seamark to the board that explained the background to the Waimanu Focus Group and his recommendation for the revision of the original terms of reference, plus the names of the 7 community members proposed for membership. And there is no copy of his proposed revised terms of reference that was actually accepted by the board. Another reason, the management plans mandated by the Reserves Act are required to be subject of review at least every 5 years. There's nothing in the current Waimanu management plan that details how amendments to the plan are to be tracked. Perhaps council staff can advise how this is done in other management plans so the board can be sure that members of the community can have confidence they're using the current issue. In conclusion, I'd like to recommend to the board tonight to resolve and record the following. The revised terms and reference, the revised terms of reference and membership approved at the 18th of June 2019 board meeting remain extant. Second, since the 18th of June 2019 meeting, 2 of the original members have been replaced as follows. Board representative Mr. Seamark retired and was replaced by Mrs. Griggs, who has also retired and been replaced by board member Tonchi Begovic. The second replacement is the care group coordinator, Mr. Dennis Thomas. He's left the area and he's been replaced by Mr. Clive Cameron. Third, the minutes of this meeting should include a copy of Mr. Seamark's 18th of June 2019 submission and the revised terms of reference accepted by the board on that date. Finally, I think the board should request from council an acknowledgement of these resolutions if this happens tonight. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Steve, for refreshing us on the particularly the procedural process there. I might actually defer to Mike with regards to the detail behind presenting the revised terms of reference for the group, because my understanding through Jeremy putting forward has suggested changes that they were adopted, but are we saying that those changes weren't actually formally adopted by the board? That's I just want to make sure.
The board on that night accepted the proposed changes to the. In fact, it was to the structure of the focus group, where the substantial changes were, because the previous structure, most of the people who were supposed to be attending had paid no interest and had never attended any meetings. It was just becoming a farce. The board certainly moved and accepted the proposed changes, and from there we then had the revised list of folks who are going to be on this new focus group, and the names that were presented were also accepted. There was a couple of slots that were going to be named from elsewhere. One of them was the council rep, and it turned out to be Rob somebody.
Cross.
Sorry?
Cross.
Rob Cross. It turned out to be the council rep, and the iwi folks were invited to nominate somebody, and I haven't heard the result of that. Am I?
Hi, Steve. I thought so. Yeah. Ate e mate. Mr. Chair, may I?
Of course.
So, thank you. Look, so first of all, an apology. There is a mistake in the paper outside what Steve's been talking about. Top of page 15, the date where it says June 29, 2019, it should actually say March 21. So my apologies, Mr. Chair, but there is actually an error in the paper. But putting that to one side.
So where was that again, sorry?
Top of page 15, the group could adopt the version presented in March 21. The group could adopt the version presented in June 29. Actually, that is referring to the version of March 21.
Right.
But can I just say, oh yeah, sorry, Councillor, that accounts for the confusion around reconciling the numbers back as you were trying to do, I think, yesterday. But can I just bring it up a level? In from the council's perspective, we're actually reasonably relaxed about who actually sits on the focus group, and are really happy to work alongside the stakeholders to make sure that the balance of that meets the needs of the community. The management plan itself is actually a little bit, I wouldn't say ambiguous, but more silent, but it's not crystal clear on this. So I think that there's two aspects to that. One is that can cause confusion, but Steve, I think it also gives us opportunity to tidy this up ourselves without having to get too litigious about it. So if the board were of a mind, I'd be happy to sit down with Steve, who I know from a previous life, to tidy this up. I actually don't believe that the original management plan actually specifies that neither actually the board nor the council actually needs to make a decision on this, but it needs to be done in collaboration with the community. So we're of a mind very much to do that. And if Steve and the other members of the other interested parties are willing to do that, we're more than happy to sit down and to work through that offline, Mr. Chair.
Okay. I think that might be a sensible solution there, Mike, with regards to, even looking at the membership of the group too, I think, and also looking back to, unfortunately, I can't recall some of the conversations that happened when we were discussing with Jeremy about the membership back in 2019. So my memory's not vivid enough on that, but it would be good to ensure that we've got a consistent view to what the board's previously accepted and endorsed, and if there are inconsistencies, that we're not creating something more than we need to.
You do have two hands up, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Councillor Provident.
Okay, so if Jocelyn, you're the first person there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, so just so that I'm crystal clear here, so this paper has come to the board for us to recommend what the focus group has actually decided. Is that correct?
So officers were requested by the board to report back on what was a relatively confusing state of affairs, with some confusion around what had and hadn't been approved by the board.
Right. So in writing this report, was the focus group actually consulted?
No, it was not.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
And if I'd known it was Steve, I would have done that.
Thank you.
Is that all from you, Jocelyn, there?
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Tonchi? No?
Well, thanks, Mr. Chair. So thank you for that, Steve. I know it's a challenging one for you as the leader of the focus group. Particularly, I might add, and just I might add that it's been very difficult to find a human face at council to get involved with this group. To his credit, more recently, Tony Martin has filled a gap, and we are, very appreciative of Mr. Martin. Not really, his operational mandate to get involved in this sort of thing, but I mean, he's been with the council a long time and has a lot of history too. So he's been invaluable over the last 4 to 5 months. But really, I need to stress that council needs to get involved, staff, and not just leave this focus group, at arm's length, and elected members caught meat in the sandwich trying to drive something, a community initiative which is going, it's bumbling along. So, Mike, thank you, and it would be good to meet formally the new GM of Parks and Reserve, if that's their designation, and have that offline meeting prior to our next focus group meeting, which Steve and I have discussed is probably better placed immediately after Easter, so mid to later April, so we can get back on track.
Yeah. Through you,
one of the, sorry, I just might add, we keep pointing at the management plan, which is 22 years old, and it's a dinosaur. And I know it's part of a wider work that's being done district-wide on revision of management plans. I'm not sure where this particular reserve is in the pecking order, but with we just need to give a bit of oxygen to that as well, because the management plan and the focus group's terms of reference are what we're sort of guided on, and they're dysfunctional.
Thanks through you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
Yeah, so just a couple of comments. So the new manager for Parks and Open Spaces, his name is Gareth Elhoff. Some of you have met him already. He's really keen to get out and about and to meet people, so I'll make sure I connect him with you, so that when the time is right, you can spend some time with him. He is busy hiring at the moment, so he has 3 advertisements that went live today. So we are rebuilding that team so that we can rebuild some of the momentum that we've lost over the last 6 months. Just respect to the management plans, which I think is on the agenda for later on in the meeting. But we do have 117 reserves. We should have a management plan for each and every one of those. We only have management plans for 10% of those at the moment. So we've got some work to do. And what I would say for the lagoon is that at least we have a management plan, even though it's 2 decades old. So it's better than nothing. Sorry, that's a very low bar, and I don't mean to sound casual about it, but we've definitely got some work to do. And it's a 3-year project to work on those 117 reserves. And within those 3 years, we know there's going to be a few more reserves added to that list. So, but I'll take your point, member, and I'll make sure we do what we can realistically and practically by making those connections with the new parks managers over the next couple of weeks, if you like.
Thanks, Mike.
Mike, if I just might interject there, I guess, just since we've been presented from the Rikarangi Residents Association in terms of, what they're driving for is essentially a reserve management plan in essence also, and that's been community driven. What I'd hate to find is that, it ends up in a place where the Waimanu one is too. And we're going to stifle any innovation that comes out of our community through bureaucracy. So I really want to make it take heed from what we're actually picking up from Rikarangi and some of the good work they've done, and how we can capitalise on that and take it forward. But also looking at this group in particular, it's like Tonchi mentioned, it's stumbled along for a considerable period of time, and it's not really had any legitimate legs and or investment tied to it through either annual plan or long-term plan process. And I think this is a really good opportunity to see how we can actually see how these plans can be crafted and shaped into something that we see something tangible happening in our community.
Sure. Can I reassure you that it's not our intention to drown the community in bureaucracy with those 117. Where there are initiatives that have come from the community, why would we try and kind of impose on that? I'll give you my assurance, Mr. Chair, that it is our intention to strike a balance and light touch wherever that is possible, and where something is community driven, we'll be enabling that rather than stifling it.
Okay, I'm just conscious of the previous conversation we had with the other group and advanced they are with regards to moving forward. And it'd be great to see these sort of two projects. They've got great potential for our community, and I have seen the frustration over the period with the Waimanu Lagoon project, and it would be great to see how we can get that working forward, and potentially the plan updated so it can be realised. Because I guess at this point in time, there's lots of plans, but if they've got no funding behind them or no council resource behind them, nothing will happen, and we'd essentially have a paper tube sitting on a shelf, gathering dust, as opposed to directly driving some of those investments in our community, or even just driving local community groups to participate and invigorate some of those areas. So we'll look forward to working with the new Parks and Reserve manager and seeing how we can take that forward, to be honest. And maybe this could be something that could be put forward on our future agendas, to be honest, is how we are working with Rikarangi, for example, and also the Waimanu groups, to just see that we are tracking their progress, because it gives us some real visibility about what's happening. So if that's, Tracy, if that's something you could note for future agendas, please, that could be tracked, where we are with regards to particularly Rikarangi and also the Waimanu Lagoon Focus Group.
Yeah, noted.
The management plan. Thank you. Do any other community board members have any questions there? I can't see any hands up there, so what we would do is we'll move to the next person on there is Edwina. I haven't been given a note with regards to whether Edwina was wanting to speak or was a participant in the meeting as an observer. If Edwina can let us know if she's would like to speak, or is continue just as an observer. Edwina, are you participating in the conversation, or can I move to the next public speaker? Okay, if I could ask Gordon to be the next public speaker. If we could invite Gordon to the floor, please, Tracy.
Gordon, would you like to address the floor?
Can you hear me, Tracy?
Yes, indeed.
Oh, well, look, I didn't earlier ask to speak, but since I just made a note to send you an email to pass on to members of the board, perhaps I can just give them a very quick update on the History Boards project. as a result of some discussions we had with Kahu Ropata a month ago, we think we've got a way forward now, and our Waikanae Residents Executive Committee have agreed that we should retain the services of Jane Combin, who is a local designer who designed the Pukerua Bay history boards, and whom Rosie Salas from KCDC recommended as having used her elsewhere. Design her to come up with a sort of a mock-up of what we have in mind for one of the boards, and to use that mock-up to consult the Waikanae Community Board, the local iwi representatives, and of course the KCDC Parks and Reserves people, to get a clear consensus on the design and the construction details and so forth. We'd probably want to talk to Menshed too, since they volunteered some service. So just to let you know that process of commissioning Jane Combin is in process, and we would hope to have a mock-up that we can talk with you further about in a month or so's time. The cost of this mock-up will be in the order of $500, I think, counting the expense of getting high-resolution images from the Turnbull Library and the National Archives, and of course Jane Combin's time. But we think that's money well spent in order to get the broad consensus amongst the community and the territorial authorities. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Gordon. And as always, I think the community board's really grateful for the work that you've undertaken down at the beach, and we look forward to seeing what those mock-ups, those drafts look like at a future community board meeting. Are there any other questions from board members? No? Well, thank you, Gordon. Really appreciate that. Well, that winds up our public speaking time. In terms of moving to...
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
I was advised earlier that Gerald Rees wanted to speak, and I note that we've got someone in attendance whose name is Windows. I'm wondering if that's Gerald.
Sorry, I couldn't see any.
There he is. Kia ora, Gerald.
Good evening all. Sorry, yes, no, I was a little bit like Gordon. I was keen to listen in, but while I've got the opportunity, I suppose I was a little bit surprised to see the agenda item on the community hall and the pictures in terms of the work that had actually been done, and the assessment based on what I understood was going to be the situation at the last meeting, where I thought the community board had agreed that we were looking at a broader range of issues about what might happen at the hall first, rather than spending money that might be chucking good money after bad in the longer term. So I don't think that the items that have been done probably have been useful in the short term, but I hope that the community board can sort of discuss the issues and look at what was agreed at the last meeting, basically, and go back and see what this means in the longer term. I don't know how much money has been spent with all the money that was been allocated, 300,000 or whatever it was. It was interesting. Also, there was comment there about assessment for earthquake and also for asbestos, I think, in the thing that they talked about. But that's all I've got to say. Thanks for the opportunity there.
No, thank you very much there. And just in terms of response to that, both myself and I believe Jocelyn, raised this at the annual plan workshop, but also I've also discussed this with Wayne Maxwell about the appropriate investment of can we divert it, and recognising that we're after a larger and more long-term project for the hall. So I think that'll probably come out. Some of that discussion will come out when the paper's discussed there.
Yeah, thanks for that, James.
Yeah. Do any other board members have any questions? No, I can't see any hands raised. No, thank you very much for that. You're just as surprised as I am, particularly with regards to, I thought we had hoped we might be able to stall some of that investment and seeing it put forward and to yield something a bit better about investing in a hall for our community. So really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be tempted to try the new wheelchair ramp at the back to see how good that is anyway. So,
well, to be honest, it's probably really helpful with regards to fire and evacuation of that hall in its current.
Yes, yeah, no, I agree.
In terms of
now, the one on the front is rather steep, which I wouldn't like to try in the event of a fire. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, no, it can't be much fun trying to navigate that front entrance, that's for sure. Okay, so that draws our public speaking to a close, but it takes us to public speaking time responses, and I'd probably like to pick up the other items I think have been fairly well covered or will be covered in the agenda items, particularly comments with regards to the terms of reference. We can pick up in a discussion of the paper, but with regards to the Rikarangi Residents Association, I would like to put it to the board that we encourage, I'm not sure of the right words for this, but we've had a little bit of dialogue at council about clarity about what notes the Waikanae board requests or what actions the council will do with our recommendations. So, and that certainly hasn't been clarified as of yet. Jocelyn will recall at the last council meeting, I was seeking clarity about actually what the recommendations or requests that a community board make to council and what it actually means on the ground. So, but I don't want to lose visibility of this particular project and the effort that the Rikarangi Residents Association have put into it, and would like to suggest a form of words, be it right or wrong, and seek your endorsement or approval or potentially some changes, but that the Waikanae Community Board support the proposed resource management plan put forward by the Rikarangi Residents Association, and it could be used by council for public engagement to enable that plan to be used for a consultation document. Do I have any discussion on that particular point, and if the board would like to support or endorse the work that the Rikarangi Residents Association's put forward? Tonchi.
No, sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm just agreeing with
Okay.
your proposal. I don't want to speak to it.
You got Jocelyn and Richard. Jocelyn and Richard got their hands up.
Okay.
It would be great if we could have the words written down and maybe shared with us, but it's my understanding that it's actually a landscape plan. It's a draft landscape plan. It's not a resource management plan, I think, which is what you suggested it was. James?
The reserve management plan, essentially, isn't it? Is how I understand what it actually will be.
Yeah, I think you gave it a different, you called it something different. So we've got to be quite clear that we've got the right wording.
Understanding, like I mentioned, it would be a reserve management plan essentially. So
yeah, it's a reserve.
Mike, in terms of, I'd seek your guidance with regards to how we also respond to this with regards to being a board and the fact that this document hasn't gone out for wider public consultation, but recognising this, the preliminary work that's been undertaken to date, how we can capitalise on that and you know, make a recommendation to council that this work can be taken forward legitimately and with the support of the community board.
Thanks, Mr. I see Richard's also got his hand up, but just quickly, I think I'm a little bit worried about the board making a resolution on basically on public speaking items. So I just think we need to be a bit careful around the verb that we use in any resolution. I think if the board were to wants to approve in principle or endorse, I think that would be fine. But I wonder, and if Tanaka, if you're still on the line, I wonder if we don't need to come back at the next meeting to get a formal resolution that has been publicly notified rather than making a formal resolution from public speaker. I'm just a little bit worried about the ins and outs of that. Are you there, Tanaka?
Yeah, yes, I am, Mike. And I think the board, whilst acknowledging and accepting what the Rekarangi residents have put to the meeting, I think moving forward, there needs to be conversations with how this would move forward with council officers and the elected members themselves.
So taking it to the next step, then, as a board, does that mean that we need to request that a paper is put forward to the board with recommendations to the next community board? Is that what you're suggesting?
So, through you, Mr. Chair, Mike, I think that it needs to be taken to council officers, so within Gareth's team, to be looked at and to be managed, and then for a decision to come through staff.
To the board?
To the board, yes. Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought, Mr. Chair. But in the meantime, I don't think there's any harm in the board resolving to support in principle what the Residents Association has presented this evening, and to represent its support for the Rekarangi Residents Association initiative.
Yes.
Can we take it a step further in requesting that? I know we have no powers over staff, but actually, can we ask that staff work with the Rekarangi Residents Association to,
agree, sir?
I think that will be fine.
So, in terms of moving, sorry, I can see Richard's got a comment there, his hand up too. Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure we formulate the right words to get visibility from this issue with council, but also the support of council staff to make it actually go forward.
So if I can suggest, Tracy here has put some words in the chat.
So I can't see the chat, just one moment.
That the Waikanae Community Board support in principle the proposed Rekarangi Domain Working Draft Management Plan and request that staff work with the association to progress it.
Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Good.
Do other members of the board support that?
I'm happy with that.
Okay, so if that's the case, do I have a mover?
You still got
that, Mr. Chair.
You still got Richard with his hand up there, James.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, yeah, I'm just Zoom thing. Sorry, Richard. I'm not doing it deliberately. It's just I'm not the best on a Zoom.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Because the conversation keeps moving past my question. But I'll just note that Tracy's recommendation, or not Tracy's recommendation, Tracy's words, she skips out the working draft reserve management plan. So between draft and management, we might need to throw in reserve just to make it, that's better. And I'm fully in support of us progressing it as hard as we can within the limitations of a community board that has no power. Put my hand down now.
Yeah, okay then. So taking that to the next step. So do I have a mover for that?
I'll move that, Mr. Chair.
Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Donchi seconded. Motion's carried. Any discussion?
No. No, we haven't had, it hasn't been carried.
Motion's carried. Sorry. Any discussion? All those in favour?
Aye.
Motion's carried.
Just an admin question. Should we be voting with our buttons, or are we happy to vote?
Councillor Pranano, I think with a small group of people like this, it's quite manageable for me to
Okay.
keep track of the voting just by way of your verbal responses.
Okay, thank you, Tracy.
Thanks, Tracy. So I think that's a good result for the Rikarangi Residents Association. So I can see that that's still on line at the moment. So thank you very much for all your hard work, and hopefully we can see some things happen for you too. Thank you. Okay, so if we move to agenda item 5B, leave of absence. Do we have any requests for leaves of absence from community board members? No. Jocelyn's put forward 2 items of matters under an urgent nature, and last time I deferred those because Tonchi wasn't able to participate in the board meeting. So there's a couple of items. It's about electing a deputy chair, but also the replacement of roles that Margaret Stevenson Wright previously held on behalf of the board. So I wonder if we probably move to addressing establishing a deputy chair amongst the board in terms of my absence or unable to attend. So I guess that's open for discussion with regards to how we might do that. I'm reasonably comfortable with any recommendations that come from the board. I feel that we can all work together. I think we've been a pretty elastic group over this challenging triennium with regards to COVID and some of the departures and comings and goings that we've had. So, yeah.
I'll make a recommendation if no one else is willing to speak.
By all means.
I'd like to nominate Richard Mansell to be the Deputy Chair of the Waikanae Community Board.
Yep, I'm happy to do it. If no one else is, I'm quite happy to not do it as well. It's sort of a poison chalice, really.
I'm happy to second that.
That it's a poison chalice, or
no? Second the nomination.
Right.
Okay, so do we have a consensus among the board? Yeah. Well, Richard, congratulations. They've been the elected for the deputy chair.
Yeah, elected to high office. No,
higher places we shall go.
No extra remuneration.
Well, maybe at the next training you can have my job. Now, on another note, in terms of taking over the roles that Margaret Stevenson Wright vacated, Margaret was on a couple of committees. Now, I think Tonchi's already taken the seat with regards to the Mahara Gallery Trust board, so I think we're adequately covered there. And Margaret was also involved on the Waimanu and also the Fair and Reserve Focus Group, which I believe both Richard and Tonchi are involved in. Jocelyn, you might want to elaborate on what other groups that that Margaret participated in, because I'm not familiar with any feedback from those other groups than those that I've mentioned from Margaret that was meaningful.
Yeah, so I suppose, you know, off the top of my head, and is that she was on the roads, I think, safety advisory group. You know, she often reported on that. So I suppose, you know, obviously, yeah. I'm not sure whether anyone has actually done a list of the groups that she was on. So I think certainly it was some type of road advisory group, and I think there might have been age concern or one of the age age group as well.
The Older Persons Council, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Some of those were like the Road Safety Advisory Group, and I believe the Older Persons Council were roles that she had a interest in and weren't necessarily portfolio roles that require the endorsement of the board. I might be incorrect in that. I don't think there is a place open for community board membership in the Road Safety Advisory Group, though, for the Waikanae Community Board. I think it's an ad hoc role there.
Could we seek advice from Mike maybe on this, please?
Mike, it'd be helpful for your input on that.
I have to be really sorry, Mr. Chair, but could you repeat the question, please?
And just in terms of, Margaret was on, she participated in a plethora of local groups, not necessarily ones that were, had what would you call it, a formal relationship to the board, yet more as a portfolio interest. And one of those was the Road Safety Advisory Group. And also the Older Persons Council. Now, it's my understanding that Margaret's participation in these groups weren't as the head of the community board, but were through her own local advocacy as a portfolio holder. And I'm just wondering if you might be able to provide some insight into whether there is actually an opening on these groups that constitute a requirement of the community board's participation, or these were actually portfolio pieces that Margaret sought to participate in. And it's my understanding it's the later of the two.
Look, I have to be honest. I would have to come back to you, Mr. Chair, but my gut feeling is that if it's voluntary and it's not an appointment on behalf of the board, that that wouldn't require a replacement from the board. But I guess I'd have to gauge the board's interest in both road safety and older persons issues. I do notice that Councillor Halliday has his hand up, and I think he might be more across this than I am.
Okay.
And I can chip in if there's time.
Thank you. Martin, if you could.
Oh, look, look, through you, Mr. Chair, I'm on the Older Persons Council. I'm not aware of a appointment as such from community boards to that role. It's more of a voluntary be involved if you're an older person as such.
No, that's consistent with my view too, Martin. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, wasn't prepared to speak to this today, just here as a support role for Tracy, but we do have a delegations and structure document, and I believe that Margaret's appointments, which have been already assigned to members of the board, have been done so. So the two that Tonchi and Richard have taken those appointments. I can go back and go through the document again and provide you with a list of any other groups, but I'm pretty sure that they've been filled.
That was my understanding too. So no, thank you. If you could confirm an email to the board at a later date, that would be great.
So the Farrison Reserve, I think the terms of reference state that there's two members of the community board on it, and Margaret was certainly appointed to that by this community board. You know, whether so Richard's obviously on that at present, whether he feels that he needs the support of someone else, or whether by not having someone else that the terms of reference aren't being met. I'd be interested to hear staff comment on that, please. Or actually Richard as well.
I'm more than happy to have somebody else on it, because I'm floundering along pretending I know what I'm talking about when in reality I don't. It's interesting that there's a whole review of reserves going on and their management plans, because I think Paris and reserves probably well overdue like everyone else. And possibly having an extra person on would be useful. It's from what I've seen, it's a role that's really hurting KCDC staff and the enthusiastic volunteers that we have down there into the right room and looking mental. So I've managed to do that, but I haven't done a lot else on that job. So if somebody else wanted to jump in, they'd be more than welcome. In fact, I should probably report that because Margaret had such a wealth of knowledge, I've asked her to stay on especially with their Arbor Day liaisons with the two local schools, Kapanui and Waikanae schools. So she's actually still, in my mind, on that group, but she's probably a volunteer.
Okay. So Mike, just with regards to, would there be any issue of the board either not having an extra member on the group according to the terms of reference? Is that going to be material and significant, or if the board's happy with the current membership, does that suffice?
I don't believe there's any issue, Mr. Chair. I think, as we heard from Steve before, communities change, reserves change, and needs change, and I think we have to kind of get used to the focus groups and the support groups changing with it. People come and go. In fact, people die. That's a real issue for us in our district with respect to these groups, is the age of them. So I think we have to get used to the idea of being flexible and living with what we've got. So to answer your question directly, no, I don't believe that's a substantive issue.
Okay, so I guess to wind this issue up, thanks, Mike, do any other community board members want to put forward their hand with regards to the Farrison Reserve? Do I see any hands? No. No, well, I think we might stick with the status quo then, Richard, if you're happy with that, and move forward to the next agenda item. So if we move to agenda item 5D, community board members' activities, if I can just probably, like what I normally do is just ask everybody for just a quick summary of one activity that they've done since the last meeting that they feel has contributed to the Waikanae community, that'd be great. And if we can have someone put their hand up to start, that would be great.
I can start that. Mine's Farrison Reserve. We had an on-site meeting with Gareth Eloff, the new Parks guy, and his offsider Andy Mackay, and we had 3 members of the Farrison Reserve focus group and myself, and we probably spent about 2 hours walking around discussing all the issues, working out some work that could be done and started again. As I've mentioned, I've got Margaret on board to just do the liaisons with the schools because she's had that contact with them before. So that part of my job is proceeding.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm just going to go across my screen there. So Michelle, if I go to you, and then I'll go to Tochi and Jocelyn.
Yeah, so on the community-led recycling initiative, the small group has met again, and there's a couple of proposals being put forward. There's been a lot of research done by members in the community. Last week we met with the council staff, and we're able to identify that there's potential sites still accessible to us, which would be subject to just negotiations. So positive moves forward. I guess the question will be, at what pace can we move it forward, and will it be at the speed that the community expects?
Okay, that's great news.
Can I ask Michelle whether this recent government announcement is going to affect you in any way?
Interesting. It did come up in the conversation, and I think the conversation ended up around that was more around, well, is the current model, business model, suitable under a different national approach? There were issues around security and those types of things going on. And I felt that the community was more in a let's take a different business model, which was more circular, and allow the community in versus existing traditional models, which kind of like put a security fence around things to keep people out. So that was quite an interesting part of the conversation. I don't think we've finished that part of the conversation, to be honest, Richard.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, Tonchi.
Sorry, I'm just looking at a document. I don't have any highlights to share this time round, Mr. Chair.
Jocelyn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm going to follow on the same tact as Michelle. So we had, I was part of the meeting that we had during the week, and I suppose the meeting was spurred on by a hui I attended in February, which was for a initiative at the Otahanga recycling location in terms of some of the work that they were going to do there. It was actually really interesting because there was a lot of people from around the country who are into recycling one way or the other and all different sorts of products. And I suppose the reason we had our meeting last week was to see how Waikanae recycling facility fitted into that.
In terms of my own response, I've been, unfortunately, I've had COVID, so it's taken a fair chunk of time out of my availability. So, but one of the things I have been involved in is the Kapiti Manaaki response to supporting COVID in the Kapiti Coast. So putting in steps with the local hub to make sure that they're able to adequately respond to. That's got nothing to do with me as a pharmacist in my pharmacy role, but it's just making sure that our community's got equipped and able to respond now that we've got an endemic form of COVID in our community. So hopefully we've got outreach services that can reach our vulnerable communities, particularly people with physical and mental disabilities in particular, but also try to look after our vulnerable elderly at the same time. So it's another bit of work. It's not related to my healthcare work, but it's related to being involved in our community and healthcare provision. So thank you. Now, if we move to draws agenda item 5 to its conclusion, if we now move to agenda item, sorry, I'm just scrolling through 6 reports, and if we could, I believe it's Kevin, isn't it? We'll be talking to the Waikanae Community Board update on the Beach Hall.
Actually, Mr. Chair, I'll kick it off. And we have Kelvin in support. So you have met Kelvin before. He's the council's property manager. But welcome, Kelvin. And can I just acknowledge Gerald's little statement before about the state of the hall and where we're headed. So can I just say from the outset that so there's no funding in the LTP to replace the beach hall. Yeah. The LTP is not revisited for another 2.5 years. The construction market as it is at the moment, so Kelvin keeps a list of the construction contractors available in the district. 25% of them are either completely closed or largely decommissioned as a result of what's going on around the country at the moment. So the reason I'm saying this is realistically, in terms of actually having something that replaces the existing beach hall, we're talking several years down the track. So the works that we have done are the bare minimum to make sure that the air quality and accessibility of the building are sufficient, and we can keep the thing going for a few more years while we decide what to do. So that's the reason behind us doing what's pretty much bare bones maintenance. Now, Kelvin did the contract, so he can talk in any detail about any aspect of that you like. But I just want to explain that's what's happened here. We're not doing anything over and above what's actually required just to keep the thing healthy, really. And actually, having come from Wellington City, where one of my duties was looking after the risk of earthquake-prone buildings, this building does have a greater risk of collapse in an earthquake than a new building. So we're actually quite keen one way or another to see some progress on the future of the hall. That's probably all I need to say, I think, Mr. Chair, but happy to take any questions between Kelvin and myself.
So just, Mike, just to pick up on, because we spoke at length at one of our community board meetings on this, and we've also, I know it's not in the long-term plan, but I guess the key thing for us is to work with yourself and Kelvin with regards to how we can structure or shape future long-term plans and use this as, a stimulus to generate a bigger discussion in our community about how we go about maybe replacing or finding a suitable alternative to the Waikanae Beach Hall. And, you know, I guess the board has naturally been concerned about, we don't want to just throw good money after bad, and could some of that funding be redirected in something else that could actually form some form of consultative process to you know, inform future LTPs. So I guess that's where the board will be coming from our thoughts. And yeah, I completely get it if you know, with regards to fire and earthquake and, you know, egress, for example, the ramp, you know, the current ramp getting into that hall, you know, particularly from Joel, is that, you know, trying to get up that is pretty dangerous, and probably trying to get out is pretty dangerous. So I understand that, but what I guess as a board we're trying to ask and wanting to garnish from this particular process is, how do we start leveraging off this to get that conversation going in council to put forth a long-term approach to how we address it. And I guess that's really what we're asking, and want to you know, see some traction about what we can do to make that happen. And then so there's a compelling, because what we often find as a community board when we put forward our requests for funding in the long-term plan, that the works haven't been sufficiently built up enough and are not sufficiently robust to put in a long-term plan for seeking investment. And that would be great if we can actually use some of what we're doing now, but even also some of the, what we'd like to do is actually get a reasonably detailed bit of work pulled together to show that actually, if we are coming up for a future long-term plan, our community board, whoever that might comprise of, is able to sit in front of council and go, look, this is what we need, this is what it costs, this is, you know, this is the likely time frame for implementation that's acceptable. So I guess what I'm trying to do is start laying the foundation for that to happen. And I'm just conscious that, you know, we've got another triennium coming up very shortly, and I just hate to lose that momentum again, because it's something, you know, the Waikanae Beach Hall's been on our priority list as a community board this time round, but it's, and even historically it has too. So I'm really keen to see and put a sort of a line in the sand and see how we can start working together to make that happen. So, you know, Kelvin, I completely appreciate the work you've done there, but there's some other bigger bits of work as a board we're probably seeking to achieve out of this also. So if I hand it back over to you, Mike and Kelvin, and let other board members participate in the discussion afterwards.
I see Tonchi's got his hand up.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question, Kelvin. Has hardstand been put down from the access ramp to the side of the building?
Not yet. That's being done. The ramp's gone down and the concrete's poured. There's a pathway to go back alongside the path up to the edge of the asphalt, so that anyone in a wheelchair can leave the hall of themselves safely and down the ramp, and then go around the hard stand, then go onto the asphalt. Or if someone was being dropped off in a vehicle, they could be taken up the side, and they could be alighted onto that concrete pathway, and then be taken up either themselves or someone take them up through that ramp.
Okay, thank you. So the wider question for me, and I've been dealing with and interested in the beach hall for, you know, the past 6 years, is, Mike, you talk about there's no investment in the long-term plan for that hall, yet it's a dog. Your own officers have had it outworked, you know, and seismically challenged, and it's a dog. Yet we keep throwing money at it. And then there's a relativity question for me. There's large communities being born out of Waikanae Beach area, and there's development contributions coming. Our expected growth is, you know, a further 10,000 residents over the next 10 to 15 years. So where's the money going? I mean, right now we're an affluent, suburb, and really relativity wise for me, there doesn't seem to be a willingness to provide a facility with a growing community.
May I?
Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Look, when this piece of advice was commissioned, it was very much about the state of the hall and what's happened to the hall. In terms of the strategic, where to from here, putting aside your relatively, Tonchi, I can't really I'm not really in a place to discuss that at length with you here, but with respect to the future investment, I don't think there'd be an issue if the board wanted to resolve to request officers to come back with some advice around an options analysis or some kind of feasibility study or something along those lines. I think that might be a reasonable way to kind of kick off the discussion that you want to have, James, with the community. But maybe the way to do that is just through a resolution, amending this paper with a resolution that requests that officers do that. Because I have to admit that I didn't read that when we pulled this report together. It was more about what's happening with the current hall rather than what the big picture is.
If I can add to that, through the chair, Mike, that last report, that when it was tabled, it was on the condition of the hall. It has a 10% MBS, so it's an earthquake-prone building. There was money allocated in the LTP in the year 22-23 to make good that. And there was money in this year to make good the floor. At that last meeting, it was told, it was discussed if we could hold off on that. And I said at that meeting that due to the, I was concerned about the state of the floor. There was no air getting into the underneath side of the building, which is causing issue. And to make it safe for, accessibility wise for anyone within the hall. So all we've done is carry out the two things that I said at that meeting, was make it so that accessibility is going to be in place, and we'll have some air underneath the building, and we'll see where we go from there. I was keen to hear, there is money that's for in next year, but we haven't gone anywhere in it. There was 32,874 for this year. We've spent about just on 3,000 at the moment, and there'll be about another $750 odd. So we'll spend.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just if I can just labour another question. When, and this, I don't know whether Mike's able to answer this, but for my own benefit, in a district like Kapiti, and if new development comes to Waikanae, is the development contribution spent in Waikanae or a portion district-wide?
Typically, it's managed at a district-wide level.
Okay.
But having heard Kelvin, Mr. Chair, can I suggest as a way through this that the board might like to consider an amendment that seeks officer advice on budget for 22-23 and whether that might be available for a feasibility study rather than planned maintenance, or words to that effect.
Yeah, I'd be supportive of that.
Yeah.
If the other board members do. Yeah, Jocelyn, Michelle.
I actually have, before we do that, I would like to say a few things, please. Shall I speak now?
Yeah, may as well.
Okay, so in preparation for tonight's meeting, I actually went into the agenda of the 9th of November and the minutes, and I will read the resolution by this community board that the Waikanae Community Board requests that Council defers the planned strengthening and renewal work of the Waikanae Beach Hall to enable discussion between Council, the Waikanae Community Board and the Waikanae Beach Residents Association regarding a possible alternative hall or facility which is fit for purpose. And I have to say, I agree with Dr. Rice that the content of the report that we've had before us is somewhat of a surprise. So I know, Mike, you're suggesting something, but basically that was actually in the resolution at our meeting last November.
Yes, it was.
All I can say is all we have done is basic maintenance to render the building fit for use. If we don't do that, we're looking at closing the building, which none of us wants.
So I suppose my question is, what has happened to the resolution that we made at the community board meeting in November?
Nothing.
I will have to go back and have another look for you, Councillor.
Okay, thank you. So I have a couple more questions or another comment. So, so basically the report has got, oh, that's the wrong one. Yes, here we are. Today's, I've got about 10 pages open. Agenda. Right, today here, this is what the recommendations are, that the Waikanae Community Board notes the maintenance on the Waikanae Beach Hall is being undertaken, okay? So to me, maintenance is repair. And so the floor has been replaced, the cardboard attended to, asbestos testing, ramp has been put in, and ventilation has been improved. And some of that is maintenance, some of that is new work. But when I then go look at the report that was presented to us in November, it said in 21-22 that the scope of the work included the following: asphalt external path, urinal replacement men's toilet, interior joinery, doors, etc. And so what has actually happened does not actually correlate with the work that's actually been done. And there was a budget there of 49,500. And by all accounts, I can't actually understand why. I think it was about $5,000 that had been spent, whereas, yeah, so I just can't understand, you know, I suppose what the word maintenance means versus what has been done and what was actually presented to the board last November.
So, Councillor, we had Miyamoto came through and did an assessment, a condition assessment of much of the council's building stock. And so the 5 items are under number 10 in your report. The floors, the cupboard, the asbestos, the ramp, and the ventilation are all recommendations from that report, which we're happy to share with you if you would like that level of detail.
Yeah, so saying that, in the report it talks about a report from March 2020. Then there's a report to the board on the 9th of November 2021. When was the report that that was done that is relating to point 10? When was that actually done? Do you know?
I can't tell you off the top of my head, but I think what you're getting at is, I'm pretty sure it was before November last year, if that's what you're getting at.
It was through the chair, the floor apparently was done quite a bit earlier because someone went through the floor, and it was dangerous, and that was when the floor was repaired. The items, and I spoke to them at the November meeting when there was quite a bit of discussion and the report had been tabled. And I mentioned about the ramp at the back and about how, and there was quite a bit of discussion about anyone in a wheelchair would be trapped within that hall if there was something, and quite rightly so. And I said that the 2 things that need to be done would be a ramp, because otherwise people wouldn't be able to leave the hall proper in a safe manner, and to stop anyone else going through the floor and maintain it, and until we can get a resolution, would be to put some air vents into the underneath the floor and save the building, and we don't have to spend any more money there until we come up with a resolution. So they're the only two things that have come out of that November meeting. A lot of the other work had been done prior to that was part of that report.
So thank you for that. I've actually got the minutes for that meeting up in front of me, and there's absolutely no mention of that. But what it does say here, that the Waikanae Community Board receives the information provided in the report, works for the planned Waikanae Beach Hall, which is this one here, and it does not mention, as I said, it mentions asphalt for an external path, urinal replacement, and the interior joinery, which is actually, it doesn't make sense, I have to say. I'm sorry.
So through you, can I make a couple of comments, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
So firstly, so your resolution was about deferring the planned strengthening and renewing work on the hall. So we haven't done any strengthening and we're not planning any renewals. What we have done is essential maintenance. If somebody goes through the floor, then I'm obliged to repair that floor and make sure no one else is going to go through it. If I don't, I am liable. And the same with the vents that we've cut in the side. We have issues in other council buildings with air quality, and as an officer, I have to make sure the building is safe and healthy for occupation. Otherwise I have to close the thing, and so that's the Hobson's choice that I'm faced with. Now, council members might, sorry, beg your pardon, board members might like to challenge me on that. Happy to be challenged, but at the end of the day, those are my obligations, and that is what we have done in this case.
So, and I don't disagree with that, but I suppose when you look at the paper trail, it doesn't reconcile with that.
Yeah, but Jocelyn, I think what Mike's saying is actually some of it is essential. You know, if someone's fallen through the floor, I actually understand that. And also I do recall Kelvin talking about the ramp at the previous meeting, which might not have been captured in the minute, but I do remember that. What I'm really concerned about, and I want to pick up again, and sorry, I can see Tonchi, you've got your hand raised too, but I do want to make sure that we use this as an opportunity to actually try and get some traction on this issue with regards to how we can strategically plan about how we do get a replacement or an alternative to our Waikanae Beach Hall. I think, at the end of the day, I don't want to consume the oxygen. What we're trying to do, we know we need to keep it open and functional, and I get that, but what I actually want to try and do now is actually, what do we need to do to engage with you, Mike, and the team, and also the wider council, is about starting those conversations and the planning about how we might go about securing investment in a new hall and informing future LTPs, because we're going to go around in circles talking about the minutiae. Let's get to the strategic. We need this in a long-term plan. We need this to be, basically the information and the evidence and the consultation with our community to enable that to go into the long-term plan. So, what I want to see out of this, and particularly now, is to make sure as a board that we're supported by council officers to get that work underway. And I am conscious of that we're nearly at the end of our training, and I don't want that work to be lost in the quagmire of elected member change. So if we can have some way of at the next community board meeting potentially about some suggestions how we could do that, and what we might need to do to enable us to inform those future discussions in terms of, it's going to take a while. We've got 2 years on the next long-term plan, but we can start requesting funding for the annual plan, for example, to free up some staff time to enable this to happen in the first place. So I'm just really conscious that let's capitalize on this and make the most of it. Sorry, Tonchi, I know you had your hand up.
No, sorry, I agree with you. You took the words right out of my mouth. But I also agree with Councillor Pravanov that we're missing a beat, and it was documented in November, and let's go back to that and let that resurface and think strategically. But thanks, Mike and Kelvin, for for doing that work, because that's always got to be done to keep the building safe as long as it's in use.
Thanks, Tonchi. Michelle.
Just a thought. I was going to suggest about the annual plan, getting a line for a study into the annual plan for Waikanae Beach community facilities. Or is there another way to get the Waikanae community funded in the same way to start off the options analysis, as we heard from Rikarangi Residents Association? There's plenty of people with business case experience in our community that could do this, I would have thought, if they're located in that area, if that helps us get it off the starting blocks. Just a thought.
Mike, if you're able to respond. Michelle, typically when the council don't typically use community resource to the degree, say for example what Rikarangi's done. I know that's the exception, but yeah, we do need to find a way of getting this in a like we've possibly missed this long-term plan process because the way it's worked, but it's not that it hasn't been, it's been picked up a couple of times that they've admitted to carry that forward in the long-term plan process, but I don't want it to happen again. So I just want to really make sure that we do have, it's front and center. So, Mark DeHaas sees this as a potential budget line, that we've got everything worked up in a nice, sensible solution. So, like Kelvin, thanks for the paper. It's certainly, this is just something that the community board's really passionate about. So please don't feel that we're denigrating the work that you've put forward. It's just that we really, I guess for us, there's the bigger long-term issue that we're trying to resolve, and we want to make sure that we can see some traction on that. So, Mike, I guess the key thing is in that last community board paper that Jocelyn's referred to, I guess it's actually restating that and also requesting that we actually get officer support to make that become a reality.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Look, a couple of things. First, I don't think we'll have any problem finding a resource to do work like this. We're in this market and we do it quite often. So I don't think that will be an issue, Michelle, whether it's in the district or not. Time will tell. But just with respect to the wording from the last meeting, I can kind of see what's happened. There's two parts to the resolution. The first one says please defer the works, and the second bit says to enable discussion to occur, but doesn't say who's going to actually. It just says to enable discussion between the council, the community board, and the Beach Residents Association regarding a possible alternative. I think it might be useful this time around to actually task officers, I guess, with doing that, because last time we didn't actually task anybody, we kind of left it hanging. So perhaps we could just be a bit more specific and say a request that officers report back with advice on redeployment of funding available in the next financial year to away from maintenance and into an options analysis, or words to that effect.
Well, can I even take it a step further, that the board be presented with a paper maybe in 3 months' time, that it would enable sufficient time for a paper to be drafted that comes up with some option, like an options appraisal?
Sure, yep.
Yeah.
Robin?
So
excuse me, Mr. Chair, can I interject?
Yeah.
Your standing orders state that the meeting can't go for more than 2 hours without a break, unless the meeting resolves to extend the time.
Where are we through? If we resolve that we have a 5-minute break, then is that suitable for everybody on the floor?
Yes, please.
I'd rather keep going.
Any other members would like a break?
Can we just finish this agenda item before we take the break?
Yep.
Yeah. So if we resolve to finish this agenda item, then take a 5-minute break.
Or do we have to do it now, Tracy?
The standing orders suggest that you have to do it now.
Okay, can we resolve that we
You can make the resolution now to carry on if you want to.
Resolve to conclude this agenda item, then resolve that we have a 5-minute break.
That sounds perfect.
Yep. Do Do I have a mover?
I'll move that.
Seconder?
Yeah.
Any discussion? All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. So, thank you. So, I can see two hands up there. So, Jocelyn, I can see your hands up there. So,
Yeah, thank you. So, I think, you know, we are trying to look at how we go forward on here, but I suppose I'm just referring to this paper we was given in November last year, and it says that there's in the 22-23 year, there's $2,700 odd $1,000 for strengthening and renewal work. I assume that is still actually in the budget.
There's $251,759,000.
So that's different from what was in the paper last year. Has it been?
No, that should have been the same figure. This is part of the LTP. There's 32,874 this year. There's 251,759 next year, and 23-24, 5,984.
Yeah. So I'm just going by what was in the paper last year. So how come the amount of money has actually dropped?
I don't know. I don't think it has. I just took that straight off what was in the LTP figure before the meeting.
We can check that for you, Jocelyn. We need to be careful that when we're talking about earthquake strengthening and renewals, is separate money from the maintenance, right? So those are three different lines.
That's it there.
And that's the CapEx. Yeah,
that there is what is in the paper last year.
So we can check.
And the 32.
Okay. So so now you'll see my plants in the background. But I suppose also too, in terms of progressing it, the paper that was presented in November had some quite good information. It talked a bit more about the process in terms of, it says here the strengthening work can only be undertaken on a satisfactory evidence of a demand and use survey, which is my understanding has been done, and it did have a satisfactory outcome. Is that correct?
Yeah, from memory, yes.
Okay, and so that means that strengthening work can occur, but then also down here, it says that a detailed seismic assessment will need to be completed in 21-22. Has that actually been done?
No, it was going to be done, and from that last meeting, the detail, because that would mean a lot of work would be need to be spent. So that wasn't done after the November meeting.
So what is that actually, by doing such an assessment, what is it actually, what information does it provide you, or what information would it provide?
Well, the main area is that boundary wall between the
eastern side.
Yeah, and the steelwork within that wall is suspect. So for that wall to have a higher MBS rating, we would need structural engineers to come up with a detailed design on how to make that wall up to a higher MBS rating.
Okay, then. So that there's what that detailed seismic assessment would be.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So then, when it comes to the money that's available next year, without having that assessment done, how can you properly pinpoint the money that's been allocated to building strengthening?
We have to take a best guess, Councillor. It's a bit like taking the head off your motor. You don't actually know what you got until you get in there. So it's an estimate.
So if I could, sorry, I just want to try and wrap this up in a fashion. I understand the concerns of the board, but I actually don't want to lose sight of the strategic issue making sure that we can have in place something useful and informative for future annual plans and long-term plans. So, Mike, I am really guided by you on this, and we need your assistance to make this come to fruition. So I know I'm pushing you, but I do want something to come to the board in the next sort of 2 to 3 months, outlining how and what needs to happen, and a sort of a high-level plan about how we can potentially secure funding for either a new hall or a hall in a different location, for example. So it's a big bit of work, but it would be good that I'd like to see that before this triennium's over, because I want to make sure that whoever takes over the mantle in future can actually do that.
So my recommendation, Mr. Chair, is that the board might like to consider a recommendation, something along the lines that the board requests that officers provide a summary of high-level options, including funding requirements for the replacement of the Waikanae Beach Community Hall with a fit-for-purpose facility, or words to that effect.
Yeah. Is that satisfactory to other board members?
We just might like to put a date in there. Might like to put a date in there.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we can, so with what are we? So March to April, maybe the May or June community board meeting. Would that be possible?
Yes.
Okay. So Tracy, if you could note for the next, say maybe the June community board, that gives you at least 3 months to prepare the paper, that we can have some of that detail put forward. So I guess the next steps now
noted.
Tracy, are you able to put in the chat words to the effect that Mike came up with, so that we can have a mover and seconder and pass the motion?
I wasn't able to type as fast as Mike could speak, so maybe I could ask Mike to do that.
I just don't type very quickly.
Yeah. So while he's doing that, so as I said, there's, $250,000 or plus or minus that's in the budget for next year. And obviously the board does not want to lose that money. And, I just...
What we're doing though, Jocelyn, is if we can come up with a plan with regards to some options and how that might happen, we should. Now, the problem is that's CapEx as opposed to OpEx, which is going to be an issue for council to deal with. So there is a potential lost opportunity, but actually, I think if we're honest to ourselves, I think the greater goal at the end of this is to have either a new hall or a relocated site somewhere else within the Waikanae Beach to provide suitable amenity for the community. So, I don't know. There is an issue with CapEx and OpEx there. I think Kelvin will confirm that too.
Yeah. So I suppose, So because obviously any annual plan will be signed off at the end of June this year. And if, I suppose, other council staff members get wind that we don't actually need this money for strengthening, it's going to go somewhere else, but it's going to be really, really difficult to get back for, a replacement building potentially. And I suppose really I'm after some advice on how the board can keep hold of that money, but to look at those options in a I suppose in a useful way, really. Kelvin, Mike.
So realistically, we're talking about a lot of money for a new hall. I'm just kind of talking about in terms of perspective. I imagine we're talking between, without prejudice, between $10 and $20 million or something like that for some kind of facility. North of that, Tonchi?
No.
South of that.
Look, I'll let you finish, then I'll chip in.
Yeah, okay. We're talking about millions and millions of dollars, right? So just with respect to scale, the amount that we have in next year's budget is actually kind of neither here nor there. And what we actually need is, as the chair's pointed out, is a little bit of operating money so that we can do the options analysis. I think the options analysis, if it comes up with a good business case, the business case will stand on its own 2 feet. And the things that the council will take into account at that point will be things like debt to revenue ratios, borrowing capacity, and the ability of the market to deliver, all those sorts of things. And I have to point out, as I said at the start of this agenda item, that we're actually struggling to get this kind of stuff done across the district at the moment, to actually spend our capex. So that will change over time, I'm sure. But I just want to point out that the numbers we're talking here are kind of out of whack a little bit with what we have in the budget for next year.
No, I can appreciate that. I think, Tonchi might, I'm not going to paraphrase, but, we've even talked about, using porta cabins and moving them elsewhere.
Oh, okay.
Like that. Yeah, so is that correct, Tonchi, or are you shaking your
Well,
head?
yeah, look, I mean, I get what Councillor Pravanov is trying to sort of steer us all to.
Well, I'm just actually, as long as people are aware of what we let ourselves into.
Yeah, but I think we should just move on. And I think Mike's typed resolution in the chat is worth, warrants a.
Okay, so do we have a mover for that then?
But before I go there, I mean, the spirit of what we passed in November was a discussion, and it was a robust discussion after some public speaking about, the intent of a growing Waikanae Beach community and council's community commitment to providing a facility that we can all share in. Because the community is growing, but the community hall is not. So, KCDC have to step up, and they can't keep burying their head in the sand. And sticky plastering is okay, but excuse the expression, we're going to get caught with our pants down, because exponentially in the next 5 years, there's going to be a lot more people in our community. And we need to provide a place for them to go and, whatever.
I think the options, high-level options, is a start, Tonchi. We're not.
That's what we want to do. And Mike, my blue sky thinking, council benefits from a lot of land asset around the community. District-wide, but we're talking about Waikanae now, and it could be buying a old beach property that comes up and renovating it, or a portion of council land, and it's we get a Gold Coast relocatable and add value to it. So I don't think it's going to cost millions and millions of dollars. I really don't. I just think that we keep putting these brick walls up on a thing that could be quite simple. I've spoken with a lot of elderly people in Waikanae, and I'm just in awe of their stories. Back when it was the Horowhenua or Hutt County or whatever it was, and they built swimming pools, and they it can happen. So that resolution and that meeting and that partnership needs to be a partnership, community board, council, and wider community. Don't have to do it all on your own, KCDC, but we can't keep burying our head in the sand. That beach community is growing, and it deserves a better deal than it's getting right now. So, I'm all for passing that resolution, but let's just put a bit of, make it happen.
If I can suggest to the resolution that we have 2022 in there, please.
Yeah, okay. So do I have a mover for the model recommendation?
I'll move that.
Seconder? Michelle? Any discussion? All those in favour? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion's carried. Thanks, Mike, and Kelvin there. So it's, as you can appreciate, there's a fair amount of passion for the Waikanae Community Board and seeing that hall address. So hopefully this starts to be the foundation for that road to inform future funding decisions and things. And like Tonchi described, we're not asking for a gold-plated hall, but we want to, we're asking when in some of those options to be really innovative of how those solutions could be put forward.
So,
are we going to have that for a couple of minutes break, James?
Yeah.
No. So unfortunately, James, there are actually two recommendations in relation to this paper, which we haven't actually dealt with.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just lost my page. Bugger, this way.
Page 6, I think it is.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I pushed the touch screen on my other computer and it's gone down.
So I was going to make the comment that so there's two parts to that recommendation. A, notes the maintenance, and we've had a big conversation about that, and that the major works are on hold pending discussions regarding a possible alternative facility, which I think is where we've ended up after some time of conservation.
This way, sorry, I'm just going through. So what page are you on there, Jocelyn? I'm just trying to find that.
Page 6.
Goes to Fairs.
So what we just passed, that is an additional recommendation to this report, is that correct?
It is, yes. So I guess that's the key thing is, does the Waikanae Community Board do I have essentially the model recommendation that the Waikanae Community defers the planned strengthening and renewal works for the Waikanae Beach Hall to enable discussion between council and that.
Does that replace A, for example? Or part of A?
I think there's two bits of work here, to be honest. There's one term thing that we're trying to address, and then one is the immediate. So I would tend to support, and that would be with discussion with the board, is that we do request that the council defers the strengthening work and the renewal. And then the next part of that discussion is what we've just passed there in terms of the motion.
That's a big call, that the major works are on hold. Well, that's, so I suppose it's
planned, it's strengthening work. So basically, council's essentially seeking permission for us to defer that strengthening work until we can come up with a better plan. And I thought that's what we agreed at the last meeting too. And that is just formalising that arrangement. So I have no objection to the board endorsing and supporting that recommendation. So I guess.
So if I can ask a question, what does it actually mean before? So obviously this was written before we've had this big long discussion. So what does it actually mean that major works are on hold pending discussions? What does that actually mean?
That would mean that we're not going to do any of the strengthening work as per or any major works in that hall. And that was pretty much the key that we took from that last meeting, why we've only done those two virtually safety jobs.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we weren't asking for a decision, we're just asking you to note that we have put the strengthening and renewals on hold. But we will still do maintenance as required to keep the building ticking over. That's all. Just asking you to note that.
But that goes without saying that you're going to put you're going to make it safe. You don't need our permission to do that. Like you said, that's a statutory duty. I guess the key thing is that the board from this recommendation is endorsing that we defer that work. And my understanding after all the conversations we've had this evening is that we are saying to council to defer that work in order to do the next piece of work.
So are we actually asking council to transfer that $2.5 million, $0.25 million to another year, or not?
Well, it may need, it's deferred, so it will have to be deferred to a future year if nothing comes out of this potentially. So
yeah, we've got to be careful here how we manage this, because it could disappear into a big black hole.
Well, it won't, because the building will get closed. If this work doesn't get completed in the timeline,
yeah.
The outcome will be the building gets closed.
It's not a
Jocelyn, by deferring it, this is the thing, I'd need to take advice from Mark with regards to the ability to defer capital, particularly CapEx projects. But we've seen in previous years CapEx work deferred numerous times as a board. So I feel comfortable in the knowledge that if it was deferred for 1 year, it's not going to be the end of the world, because it'll be planned for the next year. Council's never managed to spend all of its CapEx budget in any year that I've been an elected member. So I personally feel comfortable as a chair. I guess that it's what your appetite for risk is, thinking that councillors are going to use that CapEx money somewhere else, which I don't believe they will, because at the moment, what Mike just described before is that there's not the wherewithal to be able to deliver those projects anyway. So,
I'm just wondering if maybe we add something to the recommendation that we've looked at, and after basically on the advice of Mr. Tahast.
Whether it can be carried forward, I don't mind canvassing that.
I'd feel a bit happy with that. I feel a bit happier by including that.
Okay, so if we change that at the end of it, saying on advice that funding can be carried forward in future years, on the advice of Mark Tahast or something.
Did we actually vote on that? I can't remember if we voted on that. Okay.
So if we can add subject to advice from Mark Tahast that this work can be carried to future years.
Funding for that work.
Yeah, funding for that work. So do we have
funding already in the currently in the long-term plan?
Can we just double check, Kelvin? Did we have after our discussion in November, did we have any obligation relative to our resolution in November? Was there any time restriction on having to do the first tranche of strengthening work?
No. After that November meeting, and we didn't move forward with doing anything. That money is tied into the 22-23 year, not this year. It's not 21-22. It is.
That's what that says.
Yeah, I think you'll find that that is an add-on of a bit of this year, but the majority of the money is 22-23.
And then there's more maintenance to be spent the following year.
Yeah.
Oh.
So can we just move forward on this, please? Because I just don't want to keep relitigating it. So can we just, do we have a mover to move that on the advice of Mark Tahast that it can be brought forward into future years? Is everyone acceptable with that?
Yep.
Yeah.
If we can just say the Chief Financial Officer rather than name him, please.
Yeah, Chief Financial, yeah. Do a seconder?
Second that.
Is this, excuse me, Mr. Chair, is this a separate resolution to the one that Mike put forward previously?
No, so we've already approved and passed that one. This is the recommendation. Yes, we did.
Okay. Okay.
I think that's a good question, Mr. Chair. I think it should maybe be a standalone rec.
Yeah,
I agree.
So the other recommendation is the one that's in the board paper that we're just making the amendment to. So the one that we've already approved, that Mike put forward, we've approved that. This is a secondary recommendation. So basically it's just got the addition with the advice of the Chief Financial Officer in there. So like I said again, do I have a mover for that motion?
I'll move that.
Do I have a seconder?
Yep.
Any discussion? All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion's carried. Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, can I just check, Tracy, you abundantly clear on what was just agreed?
My understanding is that it's recommendation A from the report here, with an additional wording to say that subject to advice that funding for the work already in the LTP can be carried forward to future years. And that's added on to recommendation A of Calvin's report. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Okay, so if we can move forward, thank you very much for that. And thank you, Calvin, for your time this evening. Really appreciate it. I know that was a bit tight.
Oh, no, it's very, very important. And, you know, I'm a lot like everyone else. I want to see the right thing done.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If we can move to confirmation of the minutes for February 2022, I take those.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, but the standing orders require that you take a 5-minute break.
Okay.
And I think Tonchi needs that. Oh, Tonchi's already taken it.
Tonchi's gone.
Okay, I'll see you in 5 minutes. So,
Okay.
7, yeah. Thank you. 12 months worth of planning, get the long-term plan.
Yep.
Recorded.
So, just Tonchi, we've got a couple of 1 minute there. I'll text.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so can we reconvene the meeting? Yep. So the meeting starts at 9:39. If we move to agenda item 7, confirmation of the minutes, I'll take those as read.
Sorry.
No, sorry. I don't believe, I don't think that the mayor was in attendance at the last meeting.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, we haven't actually dealt with paper 6.2 on the Waimanu Lagoons Focus Group.
6.2. Oh, sorry. Yes, we do need to move with that.
Sorry, Michelle.
Mike, I guess the key thing is picking up from the comments from Steve for the Waimanu, the group, is that my understanding that you're going to go away and recommence those discussions before we make any recommendations. Is that correct to assume?
Look, more than happy to sit down with Steve and Tonchi or the whole group to talk about the membership. My nervousness is around the board's actual role in this and whether you need to actually be making a decision at all, or whether we can just do this collaboratively and just crack on with it. You know, I'm not sure the board actually needs to be involved. Certainly not clear from the management plan. So, so Tracy and I spent a significant amount of time going back and trawling through the whakapapa of this specific issue to figure out how we got to the point we're at to today. But I think at the heart of this, with Tonchi and Steve's agreement, we can sit down and work through this and actually tell the board what we have agreed. Seems to me. I don't even think it needs to go to council.
I agree with that. I think, you know, it's a decision for the focus group, and I think that a paper is about informing the board what decisions I've made.
No, I'd agree with that. So if we can this, how do we, I'm not sure if the procedural process with regards to a paper been removed from the board. So it's not, we don't need to make a decision on that tonight then, if that's the case. Or do we need to have a motion that it's agreed that say Tonchi and Richard will and Mike and Steve will liaise?
Maybe the Waikanae Community Board something along the lines of leaves the decision making to the terms of reference to the Waimanu Lagoons Focus Group.
Okay, I'd be happy with that. So,
could I suggest, Mr. Chair, that we the board might like to amend recommendation A and replace it with the words that Councillor Pravanov just provided?
Yeah. Is the board supportive of that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so do I have a mover?
I'll move that, Mr. Chair.
Do I have a seconder? Any discussion? All those in favour?
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chair, my apologies. I didn't see who seconded that motion.
We'll make Tonchi do it, seeing he's on there.
Tonchi? Good-o.
Throwing me over the cliff stuff.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, you're not the deputy chair.
We need to start throwing things over the cliff.
Of course.
Let's just move forward to getting the minutes resolved if we can.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. So you've got A. It's even actually it's a bit muddled up here. You've got A, then you've got B, which is just a table sitting there. And then you've got D, that the Waikanae Community Board requests that council notes the above resolution. Do we still wish that to happen, or do we let that lie on the table, or we just delete it?
Well,
I don't know.
Now, since the paper need to be removed and just the recommendation, we've make a. That's like I said, I don't know the procedural process to get the paper removed, and that we've made a.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it's fine to swap out the first recommendation A, and the board may strike out as an amendment recommendations B and D. There doesn't seem to be a C.
Okay.
I don't think that's an issue. Just strike those out as part of your recommendation.
Yep. Okay.
So we can, if we don't make a recommendation on them, they just lie anyway. So it makes no difference, does it?
Well, it depends whether the focus group is going to come back to the board with their recommended, basically showing us what they decided. I suppose that's up to them, really.
Yeah.
We haven't established whether they're required to, have we?
No.
Whether there's actually a requirement to report back to us or report to us, or us to be involved in any way, shape or form.
I assume that the focus group, I just need to ask this question, that the focus group does have the delegation to make a decision on the terms of reference for membership of the group.
Can you repeat that, please?
I'm asking if the focus group has the delegation to make the decision on the membership of the focus group.
Well, they will, because they'll make up the terms of reference.
But, short answer is yes, Jocelyn.
Okay.
We've had a look at that, and they can. Yes.
Right. Good. So it's just really if it comes to us, it's really just for us to note.
Yep.
Endorse, yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Can we move forward?
Do we need to actually make a resolution to strike out B and D?
No, you don't have to resolve to strike out the resolution. That's just part of the amendment is striking them out.
Okay.
So Tracy will reflect that in the minutes.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so let's move to confirmation of the minutes. I'm assuming that you've all read the minutes. Do I have a mover for approving the minutes as a true and accurate record of our meeting in February?
I think, Mr. Chair, that Michelle had a comment to make.
About the mayor's presence?
Yes.
I don't recall the mayor being present. But
Yeah.
I might be wrong.
I wasn't in the room, but I couldn't see unless they were at the far, he was at the far end of the room. He wasn't around the table.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can confirm the mayor wasn't in attendance at the previous meeting. That's an error in the minutes. The resolution can be that the Waikanae Community Board, with the amendment of the people in attendance, that apart from that, the Community Board accepts the minutes with the above amendment, sort of thing.
Do I have a mover for that motion?
Yes.
Do I have a seconder? See, Richard. Okay. Any discussion? All those in favour?
Sorry. Are we going to be able to ask questions, for example, about a report on the status of the reserves coming to this meeting? And I suppose what happened to Mrs. Bence in terms of her tree issue?
Is that but this isn't related to the accuracy of the minutes, though?
No, it's not. No, I was asking whether or not we'll be able to ask about, I suppose, the outcome of some of these, the content of the minutes.
Yeah, so that's a different issue to the accuracy. So if we could just.
Oh, yes, I agree.
So, I guess the question is, do we as a board want some follow-up with regards to that, or did we even ask for that in our minutes at the time? So which I don't believe we did. We just asked for the council and its officers to work with the individuals who put forward. So if we can move forward then, because I'm conscious of the time and it's nearly 10 o'clock. So if we can, we've had a mover, a seconder. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye. Motion's carried. Sorry, Jocelyn, it's more of a technicality there. I guess the key thing is the matters under action. Mike, are you happy to talk through some of the detail with regards to the matters under action?
Mr. Chair, yes, of course. We've put a bit of effort into the progress report for the matters under action. Can I take those as read?
Of course you can.
I know, but I would just like to mention the item 9, which has come up a few times about the status of reserves. I mentioned previously that we have 117 and we are over a 3-year period going to work through the requirement. Now, if there is a specific issue that's come before the board, which is causing this to be in the minute, I'm more than happy to address that as a specific issue, but I'm just not quite sure what is driving that request. And can I just assure the board members that the 2 members of the public who presented to you last time, that's Wendy Bence and my uncle Glenn, we have dealt with both of those issues as operational issues, and I believe satisfactorily to the satisfaction of both of those people.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, what item are we on?
we're on matters under action register. So basically that's on page 24.
Okay.
Are you going to take it individually, Mr. Chair, or do we just ask questions?
In terms of taking it as read, that the board members have done that. If you've got any questions, particularly in relation to any of those, I'd suggest that they're directed through Mike to be able to respond in more detail. So if you've got a question.
Yes, Mike. It talks in there about revocation of the Old State Highway and in particular the Clip-on Lane and the Waikanae River Bridge. Do you have any updates? It says here early 2022. It is now March. I'm just wondering if you have any more information about the timing, because it seems to be continuously slipping.
Yeah, that originally it was the first quarter of this calendar year, wasn't it? No, I don't have a further update, Councillor, but I can certainly get one for you. Just being realistic about what's going on around the place at the moment and the pace of with which some of this work is proceeding, I'm going to be conservative, but I will provide a further update to you offline.
Thank you. I think, yeah, I suppose the key thing about this here is actually informing the community as to when that's going to occur, because there will be some disruptions.
Yeah, and we got that message loud and clear around communicating with the schools in particular and other stakeholders who will be disrupted by that work. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
As an observation, they still haven't finished at Ramity South yet. So, and that they probably started that 4 years ago. So don't expect anything wonderful. As a contractor, you probably wouldn't ever have them back on site. I have my own issues around my own business, where they said they'd be there for 3 weeks, probably 6 months ago. But they're not answerable to anyone.
Yeah, shocking.
John, you got your hand up.
Yes. So can I just elaborate on item 4?
Yep.
So under member activity, I didn't really want to discuss this because it's not a highlight, but I've been discussing with a couple of board members, and there appears to be an operational capex issue with the forecasted new building, i.e. there's not enough money to run it.
Which new building are we talking about, Tonchi?
The gallery, item 4. So I'm trying to peel the layers here of, at the 13th hour, a project is live and the focus has apparently been on a new building.
Yeah.
And its poor cousin has been the operational capex apportioned to that gallery's ability to function in a new building requiring more staff, so on and so forth. Now, over the last few years, there's been a medley of staff comings and goings, but this one's sort of this is a live issue that we have, or the council have, more to the point.
I can talk to that if you like.
Okay.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. That's broadly accurate. That the trust has found that the operating budget doesn't appear to be sufficient to meet the standard of service that would be expected of that requirement of the facility. we're in discussions with we had a meeting with the board week before last, and David Shan, the treasurer, is exchanging information with our finance department to outline the areas he is concerned with, for us to figure out what we can do about it. So broadly correct, Tonchi, we're in touch with the treasurer and the chair, talking about exactly this.
Okay. Does the wider board have any questions or views on this one?
Just hope that it gets put into the planning, the annual planning process, to be honest, because it's going to be fundamental if it's going to be delivering the said services. So.
Well, the question is, Mr. Chair, it has been raised often by the director of the gallery and other members of the board over a little while, and it doesn't seem to have resonated with council staff. So, yeah.
So I suppose maybe we need to have a conversation around who is responsible for what in terms of operation versus capital. So obviously, yes. So, and I suppose zeroing in on the responsibility for finding the operational money. Is that something that, for whatever reason, was not included in the budget when the building was planned and going forward, or what's happened here? Or is it something that there's an expectation of the gallery trust would find it, but they've found themselves in a situation of where the operations are more costly?
No, I think there's I think back in 2010, the report commissioned by council identified the required capex, but it's moved along. 12 years down the track, and the shortfall has not been captured. Has not been captured. So
I guess, Mike, if you've said that there's some discussions going on, what's the likely outcome of this at this point in time?
Relative, just living on that question, relative to the commitment already made in the long-term plan, I mean, how is it possible just to apportion money that was underestimated, or was flagged but not carried through? How can the long plan? How can the budget's been set, the long-term plan?
So I can't answer that question, Tonchi. Clearly, things weren't got right when we did the analysis, when the analysis was done around this. But what I can say is we're working with the trust positively, with a view to finding a way out of it. Okay, so at some point, we probably need to do a post-mortem and figure out what went wrong. But my immediate focus is making sure we get across the line.
Okay, so I think Michelle.
Just an observation, really. When they came and put their request for funding in last month or last board meeting, I didn't say anything at the time, but I had red flags all over the place with the way that they presented the financial information. I didn't feel that they were over it at all. So I had some real strong reservations about the way the finances and the future planning was running. So I think, Mike, if they're working with them, you've got to take a fine tooth comb through everything. It's minute detail. There were just some fundamental things that just did not seem to be in place when we asked questions last month of them.
Well, it's disappointing. The gallery has near enough to achieved its financial commitment to the project, and yet we're going to have a brand spanking new building in it, and today, by monies apportioned to its operational costs annually, it's not going to happen, which is a bit embarrassing on paper.
So can I just reiterate that we're working through positively with the trust at the moment, and my expectation is we will reach a satisfactory outcome.
Okay. If we can just keep provided a bit of an update on that, then if that's the case going forward, just a bit of visibility would be helpful.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of these issues, so.
I think it's important to it's great that the Mahara Trust, they come and speak to the Waikanae Community Board, but I think we also should not lose sight of the fact that this is actually a district-wide gallery, and so these implications have funding implications for the whole district.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Can we jump forward? I just wondered, who do we end up appointing to the library working group, and is there has it actually started yet?
No, it's Tonchi and myself, but I think from when, and I think you responded too, if nobody else put forward. So that was my understanding there.
I mean, I'm really keen. I'm an advocate for James to get involved, but I'm really keen to put my hand up too.
Okay, well that's fine. Has it started yet?
I have no idea.
Mike, have you got any idea whether it's?
Yeah. So the whole point of the appointments is for the initial meeting. So that's why I think today Alison was chasing Tonchi and James about attendance at the first meeting, which I think is imminent. So yeah. Yep.
That's good. Okay. Waikanae Park. I just note that on the 1st of February 2021, we raised the work there, and we've had a meeting on site with Jamie Roberts, who's subsequently left and come back again, I understand. Have we got any further with the planning on that, and whether something's going to happen?
So just to be clear on Jamie first, so he hasn't come back. He's contracting for a specific piece of work here and there, like the open spaces strategy. He's actually not available to us on tap, unfortunately, but he is. You'll see him around because he's available on bits and pieces. So we're having to replace the parks planner. I was actually on at the park yesterday with the rugby club people last week. Sorry, with the rugby club people talking about the plans. Unfortunately, the first thing we have to. I'm talking about the club rooms here, the development up by. Yep. So will sound familiar, but unfortunately, one of the first issues we're going to have to look at is the structural integrity of that building. So we and that's really going to drive where to from here. So I went inside. It actually looked okay, but I need an engineer to come and have a look. So we agreed with Ruben and Jane that's what the next step would be. That should be happening very soon.
Yes, Mike, though, this bit of work though that we're talking about is the reworking of the park and the playground area where the skate park is, and some work that Jamie did earlier on, probably about a year and a half ago, to get the funding for the LTP. So I get picking up from what Richard, like the club rooms is another issue altogether.
Oh, okay.
What we're wanting to do is make sure that that part of the park progresses, because Jamie came up with some really good illustrative indicative plans. So it'd be good to see how we can get that mobilised and in place so it is delivered on time according to the LTP. Would that be fair, Richard?
Yeah. There was a sort of extensive or extended parking, so there could be more parking, and the market could be on hard ground. And then there was an extension of the wheels area, offering another space for wheeled activity. And then there was all the work that's going on with the felling of the trees through Transpower and the replanting of that. So there was sort of several elements within it.
Multi-use court. A multi-use court, I think, was also
that was down near the wheels area.
And this is there's money in the long-term plan for this. So we actually deferred, and Alison Law will understand all this. We actually redirected some funds.
Replicated the funds, yeah, redirected.
Yeah, I think it was $500,000. We redirected $500,000.
There's another $500,000 put into it too by council.
Yes.
With regards to refurbishment and replacement of some of the assets. So there's been some really good work. So Mike, if you're able to meet with Alison and I think Monique, and also you might need to talk to Jamie about where those plans are and how we can start getting some traction at getting those in place to I think it's 2024, 25, but we definitely want to see something happen there.
My apologies, Richard, board members, I'm not across that, so I will undertake to do that and come back to you as quickly as possible.
Perfect. Okay, that looks like it's drawing our meeting to a close then, and the time is 10:06.
Tonchi.
Sorry, Tonchi.
Oh, Richard's got his hand up.
Oh, just it's because I haven't put it down. There you go.
Okay, just another matter that I wanted to raise. Mike, council must be going through negotiations with Somerset Retirement Villages, Waikanae, on reserve contributions and land vested in council.
Mm-hmm.
Where do we get that transparency with what's going on with a significant, area of land that we can understand, what's happening?
I've actually been in touch with Somerset. I think somewhere you asked, the board asked for Somerset to come and have a chat with the board about these very issues. So I've actually been in touch, and they've agreed to come along to the next meeting to have that, to discuss strategic issues with the board.
Okay, so I mean, a resource consent has been issued to the applicant, and now I'm assuming that they're in talks with KCDC with regard to surplus land, development contributions, and because what they're proposing is, from a resident in Waikanae and its proximity to a park in East-West Beach Township, connectivity and north-south is quite attractive, and it can be quite a feature of central Waikanae.
Mm-hmm.
So how can our community board be aware of the transparency and what's being offered up and what council is willing to take and not willing to take?
So I just need to be careful here, because there's clearly there's a process to go through, right? A statutory process, and I can't and won't be able to kind of influence that unduly. But Somerset is happy to come and speak with the board about its intention and its plans. It's probably better coming from them than it is for me on their behalf, Ponchi.
Okay. I'm not sure what they would be willing to come and talk to the board about, because I'm talking about nitty gritty,
You're talking about the deal, right?
Development contributions.
Yeah, I mean, what are they going to come and put their cards on the table in a public forum? They're not.
But as a board member, are you asking to be involved in the reserve contributions discussions?
As a board member, and I'm sure my fellow board members would like to, because I'm aware that it's a significant amount of land that they want to, that the plan shows, it's a public document, shows that they want to offer up as surplus land. And I see an opportunity to have cycle tracks and walkways around that village, connecting to the Waikanae Park, to the beach, and North Narara, and to the river. And so, what's my point? I've got a special interest in it, and I just don't want the board to be to realise one day that a decision has been made and we've had no discussions or a voice and influence.
So can I make a suggestion? Oh, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, may I make a suggestion? So the way the consent process works is where there is an issue with reserves or CWB or anything like that, they will come to our Parks Department and ask for their input. So I think you've already met Gareth.
No.
You haven't met Gareth yet? Okay, I might bring him along to the next board meeting. I think Richard, you might have met Gareth already. Yep. But so he's the guy that that is responsible for that. So I'm happy to connect you with Gareth to have that discussion, Tonji, just making sure he has to be careful not to undermine any statutory process that might be underway.
Well, not me, but the Waikanae Community Board. Because what I'm trying to labour here is the Waikanae Community Board is probably wanting to see a good outcome
for Waikanae.
Sorry?
For Waikanae.
For Waikanae, yes. And you know, buggier development contributions, excuse and pardon me, if it's going to go and be spent elsewhere, but land, you can't move the land. So if you're going to take the land, it would be nice to have input and vision into what that land can be used for. Now, it will end up being a reserve, and as I said to you, I see good northwest and southeast or whatever connectivity, and dovetails into the sports fields, the Waikanae Park, which we're spending more money to rejuvenate, and yeah, I just don't want the board to lose this opportunity of having a voice and influencing. I don't see Somerset coming to a board meeting and presenting something that's
I think it's something we need to have a discussion internally and offline with staff about where we'd like to see.
Yes, and probably at high level,
negotiation. So essentially, community board could be quite valuable in supporting council staff in the negotiations with Somerset.
If I can make
sorry, Mr. Chair. I think there's a real risk in elected members becoming involved in the statutory process that officers are supposed to be undertaking. So it's my initial
what risk, with all due respect, what risk is there? What risk is there in our community board who want to protect the interests and integrity and special character of Waikanae? What are we saying here? What I'm trying to say is there's going to be a commercial decision made, all right, for land versus money. And with all good intent, I think the community board deserves at least to have a transparent input into how we visualize and see, because if there's going to be a pushback on land versus more revenue, because that's what happens, and I understand that. Well, can we know about it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I understand. So the board members would like to have a say and have some influence. What I can't figure out in my mind right now is exactly where that might be and how that might work.
But I would like it put on matters under urgency, please. So it's there and when it can be dealt with.
So yeah, Mr. Chair, we're happy to come back with some advice around that, and I'll need to ask.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
So if I can ask a question, is it still council's policy for subdivisions such as Somerset, even if it is slightly different, to actually accept, you know, that 10% contribution as land, or there's the alternative of funds, which and if it's funds, are they spent in the location in which the development is occurring? If I'll just let Mike answer, whether the money would be spent in the location in which the development is actually occurring.
Typically, the benefit of a reserve contribution is typically in the same geographic area as the consent is granted. Short answer.
So what is council's policy at present on? Is it actually to take is it actually to have the land as part of payment, or is it actually to have a financial contribution?
It actually can be either, but I'm starting to get beyond the level of my technical competence.
Okay.
So I don't want to give the board advice that I am not qualified to give.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think it's important, Mr. Chair, that the item just goes on the meeting minutes. You know, and I think I've made my point, you know, adequately. There is a method that has been measured for development contributions, and you know, we all know that revenue is better than receiving land, but in this instance, there's going to be a bit of both. And because of its proximity to all the other features in our special character of, you know, central Waikanae, I think it's important that we get it right. And I think the board has, you know, the board should be included, and watch transparently on how it's transacted, so we get a good outcome, a reserves outcome in there. That's all I'm trying to debate here.
So I think it's fair to say that previously, you know, previous council staff in this area, you know, like, you know, the bridleways and the parks, they are very, very cognizant of these new subdivisions and looking for the best outcome for the communities in which they are actually occurring. And I suppose with the Somerset one, there's stuff been going on, and I just hope that, given the change in staff, that things haven't fallen through the cracks. And I suppose I would, maybe Mike may not want to make any comment about that.
So I'll just try and sum up, because I think I'm conscious of time too, and we've got staff on here. So I think we can add it to matters under an urgent action that the board have visibility. I think it would be really potentially, and Mike, you'll need to explore whether we can have a discussion with somebody in maybe the reserves and parks team, whether it's appropriate that we have that discussion too.
In Mike's words, it needs to be tied to specific invitation by the board to come and speak to senior GMs and executive about the topic.
Yeah.
So we can put our views forward and make them quite clear, and also hear theirs, because 5 months has gone by, 6 months since the consent holder has received consent, the applicant has received consent, and I'm sure there's been dialogue.
So Mike, are you able to find out whether we are able to participate in that and how we can contribute to it?
Yep, I'll ask my colleagues and find out the best way. And actually, rather than wait till the next meeting, I'll come back. If you're happy with it, I'll come back offline with some advice.
Yeah, that would be better. To be honest, I think this needs to be dealt with offline too. So, yeah. Well, thank you very much, everybody. If we can have that under the matters under urgent action, actually, Mike, if you can take forward that request, I think the meeting's closed.
Actually, no. James, with the Coastal Adaptation Panel, have you received any invitations to attend that?
No, there hasn't been a recent meeting of that.
But it hasn't gone into recess. It must be having meetings.
Well, I haven't been invited to a meeting recently for it, so.
Yeah. Well, would you mind following up to, because I know that, is it chairs of